Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's February 4th, 2026. And for the first time in Mormon Stories history, we have an episode dedicated to the abduction, the kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart. It's a story that hit the international news circuit in 2002. And Elizabeth Smart has been in and out of the news for about as long as Mormon Stories has been in existence. She was kidnapped at age 14 in Salt Lake City as a young Mormon girl by a Mormon couple. And it's very much a Mormon story, but we've never covered it. So because Netflix has a brand new documentary out called Kidnapped, we decided that we were going to cover it. And the angle that we're going to cover it is how Mormon is the Elizabeth Smart story. In other words, her kidnapper, Brian David Mitchell, and Wanda Barzee, her kidnappers, I should say, were they believers in Mormonism? Were they influenced by Mormonism? Were they influenced by Joseph Smith? Was it a polygamy deal? Was he, channeling Joseph Smith prophet vibes? To what extent was the Elizabeth Smart story a Mormon story? That's going to be what we're going to be talking about today. Before we jump in, I want to thank everyone for joining us and ask if everyone wouldn't mind subscribing to this channel. We're only 3,000 away from hitting the 300,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. So if everyone who watches and listens to this will just subscribe on YouTube and or on Spotify, we can break that 300,000 barrier, which really will be helpful, I think, in getting more guests. To get really, really good, high-profile guests, the more subscribers you have, the more interested they are in subscribing. So please subscribe. It also helps with the algorithms. Thanks to all our donors that make this possible. And without any further ado, we have a fantastic panel assembled today to talk about Elizabeth Smart and the documentary Kidnapped. We have back in studio, Alyssa Whitbeck. Hey, Alyssa.
Hello.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And also, you'll be leading today's discussion, and you organize the flow and the slides. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Anything you want to say about you or, your thoughts about today's episode?
Yeah, sure. I'm Alyssa. I'm a writer. My work focuses specifically on women within Mormonism, just different angles about women's experiences there. So this story hits home in that way. And yeah, there's a lot to cover. It'll be good to get into it.
All right. Well, it's great to have you.
Thank you.
We also have back joining us again for the umpteenth time. Is that an official number, Samantha? We have Samantha Shelley from Zelf on the Shelf.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we can't really say we're excited to do an episode like this,
yeah, it's a
right?
weird one, isn't it? But
Yeah.
it has a strong ending. So
Yeah, you got emotional. Is that right?
oh, I sobbed at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good to have you, Samantha. And please, while you're subscribing to Mormon Stories, subscribe to Zelf on the Shelf. Is that fair?
Yeah, guys, please. We are dropping subscribers lately.
Yeah. YouTube's getting brutal.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you, Samantha. Samantha's also kind of a faith transitions / life coach. And she's helped a lot of people. So you can check out her services as well.
Yeah, not even kind of. Just fully a coach.
Been doing it for years. Anyway, check that out, Samantha Shelley. And we have a brand new face joining us today for our panel. Her name is Taylor Macy. Hey, Taylor.
Hi, John.
Tell us about you. Like, what do you do? You're a brand new face. What's up with that?
My brand new face. I am from Salt Lake and I work in the nonprofit sector, and I'm really thrilled about the work that I get to do. And I'm thrilled to get to be here today with you, even covering something that is a little bit more on the morbid side, but I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Taylor said she wouldn't come on until Mormon Stories got close to 300,000 subscribers.
I said I refuse. I was one of the high profile guests, in fact. And I said, until there's 300,000, it's not worth my time.
We're only 3,000 away.
Well, Taylor, it's great to have you. Hope to have you again and again.
Thank you. Likewise.
I mentioned in the previous intro that got scrapped that this is really one of the sort of early modern Mormon true crime stories. Obviously on Mormon Stories the past few years, we've covered Tim Ballard, Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow. I think this story very much fits alongside those in terms of it being not just Mormon crime and Mormon true crime, but Mormon true crime that has its roots in Joseph Smith, in Mormon doctrine, Mormon history, and in the founding of Mormonism. And so that's kind of what we're going to be exploring today, is how Joseph Smith is the Elizabeth Smart kidnapping story. And so without any further ado, Alyssa, why don't we turn the time over to you, and you can tell us where we go from here.
All right,
And,
great.
and we also welcome our live stream viewers. We'll incorporate your questions and comments, especially if you're able to throw a super chat. That helps us see them. And it also is partly how we pay all these wonderful panelists to be a part of what we're doing. So Alyssa, take it away.
Okay, so the bulk of today is going to be going over the documentary. So we're going to be going a lot of chronological for how the documentary was covered, but we'll also be bringing in some other clips that Elizabeth has talked about, other elements of Mormonism. But I thought we'd just start off with just the basic facts of the case. I think most people probably know, but just as a quick reminder, in 2002, June, Elizabeth Smart, a 14-year-old girl, was taken from her home. She lived in Federal Heights in Salt Lake City, a nice part of Salt Lake City, very, very devout Mormon family. Elizabeth played the harp, just very pure, very devout Mormon family. Her sister, Mary Catherine, who was 9 at the time, was in her bed. So Elizabeth and Mary Catherine, they were asleep. A man comes into their room. He takes Elizabeth at knife point, says, "You need to get out of your bed, come with me or I'll kill you." They sneak out of the house, go out the window, and they disappear. And we'll kind of dive more into, how long she's gone, what that's all looking like in a little bit. But within the first 48 hours, they received 40,000 tips. They pitched a $250,000 reward. The police thought they were going to find her really quickly just because this was such a rare scenario, but it just kind of kept exploding.
Yeah, and just we should all jump in and provide commentary with each slide. But for those who don't know, Federal Heights is kind of near the University of Utah. It's kind of east of downtown Salt Lake City, northeast, east. It's a very wealthy part of Salt Lake City.
Beautiful.
And it's right by not just University of Utah, but all those hospitals like Primary Children's and LDS Hospital. A lot of doctors and wealthy people and area authorities and general authorities for the church live up in that Federal Heights area. Most of those kids go to East High School, which is where High School Musical was filmed.
Hey, we're 20 years for that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Do we need a rewatch party?
Yeah. Yeah. For those who saw my interviews with Lauren Matthias, this is the same neighborhood that Lauren Matthias grew up in from Hidden True Crime, same high school she went to as well. And I think it's in the same ward that Lauren Matthias grew up in. And my cousin, Brett Parkinson, who's a well-known radiologist. Anyway, yeah. So 2002 also was when the Winter Olympics came to Salt Lake City. So it was kind of...
And that would have been at the same time, because that would have been in February.
Yeah. So the Winter Olympics would have been right before
this all happened.
This kidnapping. So yeah. Any other reflections? And I guess it took Mormonism by storm, and it took the world by storm. So
I do want to add, as you make the comparison of kind of the Mormon lore and the things in true crime relating to Mormonism, I think the case of Elizabeth Smart does stand on its own in a little bit of its own category, right? All of those people you mentioned were the criminals, whereas she's the victim and has since come out on the other side of it, even more well-known than perhaps her captors. Now, obviously, people know the names of the captors, but she's done so much work, and it's been kind of a good triumphing over evil in a way.
I mean, I guess you could say that Ruby Franke and the Franke family are victims of Jody Hildebrandt, but
Jody was the focus of that, right? I mean, it's true. They were
Ruby
the victims.
Was complicit, so you're right. It's complicated.
It's
anyway.
Complicated.
Yeah. No, that's good. All right.
Okay, so we just have a quick clip just of where she was taken, her chatting a little bit about, I guess, so they leave the house. I'll just set this up a little bit. They leave the house. It's the middle of the night. This man takes her. She's in her pajamas, and they go up the mountains behind her house, and they just start hiking. And
That's what say Brian David Mitchell had done some chores in their home, and
so he had been not recruited, excuse me. He encountered Lois and Elizabeth when they were downtown school shopping. So in the, August of 2001, I guess it would be. And they encountered Brian David Mitchell on the street. At that point in time, he was clean shaven, didn't necessarily look disheveled, but more like he had just fallen on hard times. And instead of asking for money, he had asked for work with Lois. And Elizabeth later reflected in saying that it was because he had eyes on her. And instead of wanting money, he wanted to know where she lived. At which point Lois gave Brian David Mitchell Ed's card, her husband's card. And he only ended up doing 1 day of work on the home that fall and never came back to be paid, but it was just a single day, and then planned for the subsequent few months to kidnap her.
Yeah. And he snuck in at night. He slit the screen, slipped in through a window. And so, okay.
So this clip kind of gives a little bit more about the actual kidnapping moment.
All right. Let's roll the clip.
And I mean, he said the night he came to kidnap me, if he couldn't find a way in, then that was God's will not to do it.
Yeah. What do y'all think about that?
I mean, I think we're going to be talking a lot about how Mormon this is, but so much of Brian David Mitchell's framing is based in God language, and everything is used as a justification for why he's doing that. And that just really, I think, centers this whole case, is that every moment is because God allowed it to happen. And at least that's what he was telling Elizabeth.
And for those never Mormons out there, spell it out for how that ties to Mormon history. Anyone?
Well, I mean, Joseph Smith, everything that he did, he said, God told me I had to marry this 14-year-old. God told me I had to do this. God told me I had to marry multiple women. God told me I had to assault all these people. And it's always just used as a way to make the women more submissive in their victimization, and to take the pressure off of the men. And that's something that Brian David Mitchell started from the very moment he kidnapped Elizabeth. He is putting the onus on God to use that as an excuse to do horrific things.
And there's a clip we'll view a little bit later where she quotes him as saying, "I really don't want to, but God is making me." And there's so many parallels with that. And Joseph Smith's behavior with how he rationalized certain actions that people had trouble with, specifically women.
I've highlighted this a lot, but the Book of Mormon starts out with Nephi, one of the main protagonists of the entire Book of Mormon, getting the impression from God that he's supposed to kill a man, chop off his head. And that's kind of an inauspicious way to begin a religious text, right? That if you get a feeling that you attribute to be from God, because it's just a feeling after all, even if that feeling tells you to do something horrific, like chop off someone's head or kidnap and have sex with a 14-year-old girl, you're supposed to obey God and your feelings, the Holy Ghost. We're taught as Mormons that our feelings are the way that God communicates to us through the Holy Ghost. And on the one hand, it's very Christian. It's very, universally religious, that your feelings can be divine. In the Mormon case, it's just led to a lot of people doing a lot of bad things and justifying it as God's will. So it's not only the prophet Joseph Smith, it's the Lafferty brothers killing a pregnant woman, it's Warren Jeffs, it's Tim Ballard and Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrand. All these true crime cases that are Mormon have that in common. All these people interpret their feelings or their desires as being God telling them what they should do. Samantha, what do you think?
Yeah, just anytime you have a person with grandiosity, I feel like if they're religious, that's going to be an easy co-opting, which is a lot of the time going to magnify what they might do as a result of that grandiosity. So it is scary because a percentage of people in a population are always going to have grandiosity.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, in the Book of Mormon and in all those examples, the specific thing that Nephi is told to do is a very tactile, literal thing. I think sometimes when we think about like, oh, the Spirit is telling me to be kind, or the Spirit is guiding me toward anything, but it's a very literal, action that we're taught within Mormonism, especially. It's not just like a general sense of the world that God can direct us to. It's big decisions and life-changing moments.
And he didn't even need to do that murder. Joseph didn't even use the gold plates. And he could have got the gold plates without killing him.
But isn't it amazing?
Isn't it cool
that he
that he followed a prompting to murder?
Yeah. And again, Samantha, to your point, every population is going to have a certain percentage of people who have schizophrenia or delusions or narcissistic or histrionic or whatever. But the reason why Mormonism can be pernicious is because believing that your feelings come from God can be the tipping point to make you feel justified in acting or believing that your thoughts or visions or feelings or dreams are real. And in Joseph Smith's case, this theme of the reluctant prophet, Joseph literally tells some of the teenage girls that he is predatory upon, God told me that an angel with a sword is going to kill me if you and I don't get married and then have sex. And so I don't want to do it, but if I don't, God and the angels are going to kill me. So we got to do it. So anyway.
And wouldn't it be nice if we had more spiritual traditions where sort of the extreme acts of faith that people did were really good things, so that when people have delusions of grandeur, they'd be more inclined to sell all their things and give to the poor, or, something more Christian, rather than kill a guy, marry a child. It's always that, isn't it? It's never
always,
It always seems to be a little bit more nefarious.
It's always like the shadow side of humanity, never the light side.
Yeah. And I don't know if this would be better, but why didn't God go to all the women that Joseph Smith married and say, you need to go to the prophet and tell him that I sent you to marry you?
Well, and I think that,
right?
Especially when you have women specifically that have grown up in the church and grown up with this narrative of God speaks through these men, they become so much more vulnerable to manipulation. I mean, I think about the countless stories there are of men telling women, God has told me that I am supposed to marry you. And how often that in a Mormon context, right? And how often that can bring up struggle for a woman, even if she doesn't want to be with this person, to say, well, maybe God did tell him, maybe I need to be humble. And there's an element of vulnerability that can be exploited.
Yeah. Y'all haven't seen my interview with David Archuleta. It's going to drop on February 17th, but I've already recorded it, and I don't want to give too much away. But in that interview, David talks about having these inclinations of being attracted to men, hating that about himself, and learning that he can't trust himself, because if his own feelings are telling him that he should love men and be with men, then he must be bad. He must be untrustworthy. And what that set himself up for was to then be vulnerable to a predatory dad or to Elder Ballard or the church. And I think it can be similar. If there's a young teenage girl who's Mormon, who makes mistakes and then feels shame and guilt for the mistakes she makes, she's going to be very vulnerable to just obeying whatever priesthood leader or returned missionary tells her. He's talked to God, so she can't trust herself. So
you become programmed to externalize authority rather than looking within and trusting your own intuition, which is such a shame.
I do think Elizabeth's story is nice because it seems like at no point in the 9 months that she was with him did she actually see him as an authority. Like it seemed like she'd had a healthy enough upbringing to that point to know that this man was not a prophet of God and she wasn't going to fall for it.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I think about this idea of Stockholm syndrome, and I think about Patty Hearst, who was the billionaire publisher's daughter in California, who was abducted and kidnapped by a terrorist organization and ended up being supportive of the terrorist organization. Like, I wonder if there was a point, let's just put it this way, if there ever was a point where Elizabeth Smart felt like she was doing God's will and following a prophet, it wouldn't be unheard of.
Yeah, but
Stockholm syndrome is real.
No, but it's not. I listened to a podcast on this. Yeah, it's been debunked. It was essentially, it was
she
based
says as
on
much.
this.
She doesn't believe that it's real. In another
Yeah,
podcast
it doesn't
she's done.
sound like she like, I can understand that people can become sympathetic to their abusers, or extreme situations can obviously, anything can happen. But actual Stockholm syndrome was sort of based on this one bank robbery where I don't know, the robbers had some good points, it sounded like, and also did treat the people they had captured like well. They weren't in it to try and hurt them. That's a whole thing.
Interesting.
But I feel like I remember something about that other case you mentioned. I just think sometimes there are these like radical movements that do have some good principles behind them. I don't remember enough about that one to say what that's about. But
I guess I would also just say whether or not I love that feedback from both of you, Taylor and Samantha. So whether or not Stockholm syndrome is real, and whether or not Elizabeth ever felt like she was truly following a prophet,
If I can interject,
pretty much all of
she's-
Joseph's wives did.
Yeah,
they did,
Right?
but
That was
they
the
had more
difference.
time. That's what I think is the difference. Is she had 14 years with a seemingly healthy family,
Yeah,
and wouldn't have known about polygamy in 2002. I'm assuming,
maybe.
so it wouldn't
Or
have
she
been
may have known
normalized
her
to her.
ancestors were polygamous, because they were.
Potentially, but I don't think a 14-year-old girl in 2002 would have known that Joseph Smith married 14-year-old girls.
No, probably not. What were you going to say, Taylor?
I apologize. She has commented on this. I think she probably gets asked this question a number of times. And just in the interviews that I watched in preparation for this, she says that at no point did she ever feel as if there was a will of God involved.
Okay.
Never had any type of sympathy toward her captors.
Yeah.
Then that's actually to her credit, because pretty much
Yeah.
all of Joseph Smith's wives, and there were over 30, and many of Brigham Young's wives, and pretty much all of Warren Jeff's wives, all believed he was being led by God. But there were also different.
And there was sort of a whole
Context.
community backing
Yeah.
those situations.
That's
Like
true.
it's understandable why
The pressure.
those wives would feel that way.
All right, Alyssa, thank you. You're so patient with us going down rabbit holes.
No, I love it. So the next slide is just addressing how Mormon the initial elements are.
I should say the Smart family has strong polygamous roots in Mormonism. So her ancestors were polygamists. And I know that because I'm related. There are Smarts in my polygamous Mormon ancestry line. So,
Utah is a
yeah.
small community.
Yeah.
One big happy family.
Has a dark humor. It's Alyssa's dark humor.
Oh, okay. So one element that I did want to bring up to give Mormon community credit, and I mean, I think this would happen within other communities as well, but within the first, as soon as they found out that Elizabeth was missing, the community really rallied behind Elizabeth, and they sent out just massive search parties. But one thing that I thought was cool that I think is somewhat unique to Mormonism is that everybody in the neighborhood knew Elizabeth. They knew this little girl. They knew how well she played the harp. And I think it turned into a nationwide search. It was a nationwide story or a national story, and everyone was searching. But I do think there is a bit of sweetness there in this darkness, that people were not only looking for this face on the picture, but they knew her, they knew her family. They were trying to help this girl that they connected with. And I think that's one way that Mormonism and the Mormon community was trying to show up in this really dark moment. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. For those who don't know Utah, I think people would assume Utah is very Mormon, but certain areas of Utah can be so Mormon that, just 3 streets in a subdivision make up a congregation. So people know each other here. Mormons know each other here, especially in their neighborhoods, but all throughout the valley, you've got cousins and aunts and uncles everywhere.
We're
right?
probably all related in some way. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, we all
Well-
kind of are. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Okay, so let's we've kind of addressed a little bit of like the basics of their family. They're really devout, and that just adds just I think unique layer. It's such a rare case. I think people know how rare it is for someone to be kidnapped for to not be a family member. That's the case here. That's part of what made it such a national story. Okay, so let's bump down just a few basics on how the case continued that the documentary covers. Initially, the family were the first suspects, understandably.
Would this have been after the JonBenet Ramsey case where the dad was suspected to have killed his daughter?
Oh, I don't know when that was.
Yeah, that was 90s or
Yeah,
I want to say it preceded this.
So I'm guessing that would have influenced people's wonderings about, even though JonBenet Ramsey's dad was never convicted, right?
Right.
That murder was never solved.
They're still doing documentaries to this
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting without
Yeah.
a doubt.
Do you all want to address any of the family elements? The brother, Ed's brother, was a suspect. He kind of gave some poor interviews. I don't know if that's something that we want to address here, or if that's just an interesting element of the
What do we think
documentary.
about Ed Smart's brothers?
Yeah, that was an interesting part of the doc, huh?
I think it was valid that they included some of his commentary because it did seem very suspicious. It did feel very, very odd, very strange. And, later in interviews, Elizabeth says, he hadn't slept for 5 days and there was a lot of stress on the family, but it definitely kind of that radar perks up of like, there's something that doesn't feel good about this.
Tom, I think is his name.
Tom.
He, in a couple interviews, he's saying like, man, everybody, he seems oddly empathetic to the captors, is saying everyone does really bad things. Everybody has secrets. In some ways, this is a beautiful story because everyone's talking about an angelic little girl or something along those lines. And it just really rubbed people the wrong way. And then he had like an inconclusive polygraph test.
Mm-hmm.
But then it also seemed like there was some weird psychic intuition with the family. Like the weird uncle saying, I think this could be someone that really likes Elizabeth, which obviously isn't like quite the right way to say it, but it almost was like him and the dad were intuiting certain truths about the situation that I just find interesting given what we don't know about consciousness.
Yeah.
Like, who knows?
One thing that I thought was Mormon about this, and I can't remember if Tom was still Mormon or not, but at least grew up that way. I was just thinking a lot about his comment that like, oh, well, in some ways this is it's a beautiful story because we're talking about this great little girl, which I think most people heard that as just this horrific, shocking comment because she's missing.
Before she'd been found,
and nobody knew where she
and
was.
him saying everybody has, that was
just
very strange.
Weird.
Very strange.
It kind of read to me a little bit like there's so much of this conditioning within our community of trying to find the positive no matter what and not really being equipped to hold any sort of grief. And so when he is at his wit's end, when hasn't been sleeping for days, he's at just this moment of major panic. I can kind of understand how, I think a lot of Mormons, like we've all been to funerals where the main focus of the funeral is, we're so glad we get to see them again one day. This is not sad. This is beautiful. And I feel like it seems like this moment perhaps was bringing up some of those feelings of like, I'm not able to like grieve how terrible this is. My panic reaction is going to be, I have to find something positive. At least we're talking about this amazing little girl. I have to find some way to salvage this. My own brain cannot hold space for this.
Yeah, like just a weird expression of it was amazing how the community came together, I guess. And so, yeah. I guess we'll never know about that.
Yeah, that was just like a kind of a strange little side trail of the documentary that was never really resolved, but just
yeah. It made you wish the documentary wasn't just 1 hour. Like I kind of hate when documentaries have to be 1 hour as opposed to like an 8-part series.
Yeah,
where you
totally.
can really get into the weeds.
Well, and if you've read her book, that was certainly how I felt, right? I felt like her book goes into so much detail and this was more of just an umbrella coverage. It was still well done and I felt like we still got, new insight, but I was craving more details.
Yeah, it made me want to go read her books. I've been listening to it now, but
Should we talk about Richard Ricci? How do you pronounce it?
Ricci.
Ricci?
Oh,
Yeah, our first suspect.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I felt so sorry for him. So yeah. Do you want to tell our audience about Richard Ricci and what happened?
Yeah, so he's our first suspect. So the Smart family, they had contractors do work on their house. Richard Ricci was one of them. He was actually recommended by the LDS Employment Center, which is just a fun little tidbit.
Which means he was LDS? Probably.
Yeah. Had some relation to it at least. But
He was a convicted
felon. Yeah. And so that was on his record, I think, of violent crime as well. So he became the number one suspect. There had been some miscommunication, disagreement with Ed Smart on payment or something like that. So the relationship didn't end well. He'd done contract work. They found out that he'd been to the house. He had a criminal history. He must be the guy. So they really
he
jump on
happened to
him.
drive hundreds of miles away
Oh,
on the
yeah,
night
on
of
that
what was
same
that? And we
day.
never found out.
Insane.
Yeah.
Nuts.
Yeah. He, I believe, in exchange for payment, agreed to Ed had agreed to give him this Jeep for work on the job, but also just as a source of payment for what he was doing. And the night of Elizabeth's kidnapping, there were hundreds of miles put onto this car, and he would not admit where he was and why there was so much mileage put on. So they were thinking, could she be out in the West Desert? But yeah, and then with his passing in jail due to the brain aneurysm, it was really, that was another one of those question marks that was like, what could that have been, and why didn't he want to divulge that information?
Bizarre. He just dies.
Yeah, and it didn't even seem like he was claiming, oh, I just went to clear my head. I like going on long drives. It just seemed like he was just giving nothing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they even offered him immunity.
Yeah. Unless it was homicide or child abuse. So maybe I'm like, did he do a different
Was
murder?
there another
on the
crime?
same, like
Yeah.
what?
Well, it's almost giving a foreshadowing of the Susan Powell
Mm.
I thought
and
the same thing.
Joshua Powell murder, because they're Mormon. And when she disappears and he goes off into the desert, right? And was guilty. So it's almost like they were channeling the ghost of, is it Richard Powell, into their suspicions about Ricci. Does that make sense? Is that a stretch?
No, there's something
Not
there. In
really.
the West Desert, it seems to be a hot spot for
For
nefarious
you
behavior.
torture crime.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I felt bad because Richard Ricci has a aneurysm and he dies. He was wrongly
Wild.
accused, right?
Yeah.
Well, and we also didn't mention that he had stolen jewelry from Lois when they went with a search warrant to his home. They find that he's if you were an investigator in this case, I think you can see why they would be so confident, because it seemed like there were so many pieces that did make sense.
Yeah, there's no reason you could imagine why someone just happened to drive hundreds of miles away that night.
Right.
It's almost impossible to imagine that wouldn't be him.
Yeah. And I'm being reminded it's Joshua Powell, not Richard Powell.
I was going to say, is that
It's
Richard?
Joshua
Okay.
Powell. Joshua Powell. Yeah. Okay. So the key suspect dies, and what happens next?
Oh wait, before he dies. In July. So it's been almost 2 months since Elizabeth has been taken. And someone else tried to break into Elizabeth Smart's cousin's house. Her 18-year-old, they put a couple chairs up by the window. The screen was cut. So it looked like Elizabeth's cousin was going to get kidnapped as well. Richard Ricci was in jail at the time. So you'd think that this would, and we find out later that Brian David Mitchell was planning on kidnapping Elizabeth's cousin or her younger sister or both. He eventually wanted to have 7 wives. So this was a very scary situation. I don't think they really covered what happened and why the kidnapping didn't end up going through, but he strikes again basically at this time, and Richard was in jail. So this made the Smart family especially believe that it most likely wasn't him, but the police is still confident that it is him. He dies. He has an aneurysm, and the police are still like, well, I guess our guy is gone. Elizabeth is most likely dead as well, and that is kind of where the police is taking the case from here.
And the 9-year-old sister who had witnessed the capture said it wasn't Richard Ricci.
At
they
that
didn't really
point that he
believe
had
her.
passed away, I think she had known the name, I want to say, because that was when they created the sketch.
Yeah. Oh, Emmanuel.
Known the, Emmanuel, yeah.
So it's like this 9-year-old's word up against all these facts and the
Mhm.
police.
Yeah.
And I'm getting one of our viewers, General85, is helping me get my timeline straight. Susan Powell murder was 2009. So after all this. So anyway.
And John Benet Ramsey was 96. I looked that up, so
Okay,
it had just
yeah.
preceded.
Anyway, thanks for our viewers and listeners keeping us honest. So do we know that Brian David Mitchell was the one that tried to sneak in to Elizabeth Smart's cousin's
I believe in her book she
bedroom?
says so, and
Okay.
I guess it was God's will for it to
Yeah.
not be her also.
Yeah, and so it couldn't have been Richard.
Right.
Because he was in jail.
So then in the documentary, we take a break from the case and dive into Elizabeth's perspective. And we start interviewing with Elizabeth. And this is a really powerful chunk of the interview. So now we're going to be diving into some much heavier elements as we're going into Elizabeth's perspective. So she tells us how that night back in June, he takes up into the mountains. There's a tent up there, like a camping tent, and another woman in some robes. Her name is Wanda Barzee, who just gives her this big hug.
Can I just say, this is obvious and kind of ham-fisted, but polygamy is obviously Mormon. The idea of an already married man wanting to take not just a second wife, but 7 other wives, and a lot of them young, attractive teenage girls. That is the Joseph Smith, the Brigham Young, the Heber C. Kimball. That is the Mormon story for the first 50 years. So, So Brian David Mitchell absolutely was a believing Mormon. He absolutely believed in Joseph Smith. He absolutely knew that Joseph Smith was called to practice polygamy, and he was trying to do the same thing. He was just basically trying to do what Joseph did.
Yeah. And
Listen to the Spirit, be a prophet, bring on young, hot teenage women, girls as his celestial wives. Sorry, I had to just.
No, I agree.
So-
I was going to say it feels almost too on the nose, but that is the case. You know, it's a very literal reinterpretation of the same story. And
like a Mormon would
Yeah.
feel like it's unfair to compare Brian David Mitchell to Joseph Smith, right? A believing Mormon would say that's an unfair comparison.
it would
What do
be
you
really
think?
offensive, I think.
What?
I think from a Mormon perspective, that's a really offensive comparison.
And Taylor, Samantha, is it unfair or is it fair?
I mean, putting myself in the shoes of a believing Mormon, I could see how that would be an uncomfortable comparison to make, but I think it's the same unease that one might feel if Mormonism were compared to a cult or Scientology, like anything that threatens the one true nature of the church. I think it would be really uncomfortable, but I think it's a valid comparison to make because of all of the parallels that we'll get into. There's more than is comfortable.
Yeah, I think when you're getting into apologetics or like arguments about different degrees of severity of pedophilia, like you're in a bad zone. Like, get out.
They called Brian David Mitchell a pedophile.
Yeah, he is.
And I was just shocked when they said that she was 14, because that's the age of at least 2 of Joseph Smith's wives. Were y'all shocked by that, hearing the age 14? Because Joseph Smith had at least 2 14-year-old wives. And my point is, Mormons are taught that next to Jesus, the most righteous human who's ever lived on the face of the planet is who? Fill in the blank, panel.
Joseph Smith.
Am I making that up? Am I exaggerating?
I was taught that.
Absolutely.
Taylor?
No, absolutely. That was the case.
Samantha?
Yeah, he said it himself, right? He's done more for the world to save maybe Jesus Christ.
Maybe.
He's not sure.
So I'm not trying to make Brian David Mitchell out as a victim or even Wanda Barzee, but if your spiritual hero, other than Jesus, is a polygamist that marries 30 women and 14-year-old girls,
It's
you come by the practice of belief, honestly. And Doctrine and Covenants 132 is canonized scripture in Mormonism to this day in 2026, condoning celestial marriage or polygamy. So it's scripture too.
It's just coming back to what we were talking about at the beginning, which is like if the most extreme culture defying act of faith that you're taught about in your spiritual tradition is marrying kids, the human psyche is really on the nose a lot of the time. So it's like, that's where you're going to go to, instead of, like, as we were saying, someone with delusions of grandeur who thinks they're a prophet of God, selling all their stuff, devoting their life to actually helping people.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a few other specific details. She meets Wanda, Barzee, who used the name Hepzibah, Alyssa, Isaiah. Even David Mitchell used the name Emmanuel.
Did y'all wonder if that was their actual temple names? Because Mormons are assigned new names
look it up.
in the temple. And so I was wondering whether they were using their temple names.
Is Hepzibah a temple name?
I don't know. Someone needs to look that up. So those of you in the audience, Julia, whoever, there's a list. I didn't know. People don't know this, but there's actually a calendar of temple names where male and female names are assigned to certain days of the week. So you could actually go back to whatever day you went through the temple for the first time and were assigned a name, and you can find out what name was assigned to you based on a calendar that they had back then, and I think might still use to this day. So anyway, y'all may not know that, but that exists. Somebody needs to find out whether those two temple names are on the list.
I can't think they would use Emmanuel, right? As it's more of a Christ,
Maybe,
but I don't know.
maybe.
And it seems like he kind of did his own thing.
Okay, so he named himself.
Okay, so she's up there. Wanda washes her feet in the tent, and then Brian David Mitchell uses temple language and seals Elizabeth to him as his wife. And she wouldn't have recognized this as temple language at the time because she's 14, but that's what he's doing.
I did think that was very interesting that he took direct verbiage from the temple ceremony in order to perform a sealing, which if you used those words, if you said the word sealing to any Mormon member, it wouldn't be foreign.
She would recognize the word sealing at least.
For sure. But that it was just so directly copied, I think was really, really interesting. Obviously informed by Mormonism to a degree.
Like, he had his own book of scripture, but he couldn't come up with his own verbiage for that.
So that's just too good.
Smith as well.
Too good.
Yeah. Can't be improved upon.
And then he does the first of he rapes her in the tent. And one element that I just thought was really heartbreaking is that she has such little sexual education or awareness at this point that she thinks if she's on her stomach that she won't be able to be assaulted. And I think that goes to show both her age and her just, Mormon innocence, misunderstanding of all of these really horrific details.
There was also something in her book that wasn't in the documentary that I thought was interesting, which is that she says, "I'm just a girl. I haven't even started my period yet." And then he pauses and yells out to his wife through the tent, "She hasn't started her period yet. Is that still okay?" And then the wife says, "Yeah, it's still okay." But I thought it was interesting that he paused at that.
It's a horrific part of the documentary for sure.
And unfortunately, so much of the case really does center around child sexual assault. And I think that's just one of the darkest elements here. We have a few clips that kind of talks about her reaction to this and how that is baked within her Mormon framework, in addition to just like the trauma of it. And then we have a few quotes from church leaders that kind of go along with this as well.
All right, so let's play the first clip.
Hey, what did you guys talk about when you were just chilling at camp for days?
I mean, he just mostly talked about like
himself.
Yeah, all the time. Just like how God called him and like how he didn't want to do this, but God told him he had to.
All right. He didn't want the reluctant. Brigham Young said that.
I was going to say that's a direct callback to whether it's the angel and the flaming sword, Brigham Young. I mean, that's a very common behavior amongst these patriarchal leaders in Mormon history.
And cults in general, don't you feel like, most cult leaders seem like they take young wives and also claim that they don't really want to.
It seems like there's this recognition that what they're doing is bad, and like
But it gives them carte blanche. It's like, well,
Mhm.
sorry, I can't do anything about
and
this.
like a way of like I don't know. Maybe I'm projecting here, but like connecting almost with the abused. Like we're on the same team as us against God. That way, I don't know. It's just
It's like on
dark.
some level they have this awareness that it's this shadow aspect of themselves,
yeah.
which is why they have to put it on, the highest being in the universe, but like not enough to actually not do it.
I mean, we've never really talked about this before, and it's really delicate. But as an adult, I have never been attracted to a 14-year-old. Like, I could actually get someone feeling like I don't want to do this. A man who is even a man who enjoys sex saying, no, I'm not going to marry a 14-year-old. That's horrific. And I don't even want to. So like, that's within the realm of possibility for my brain. But like you said,
Well,
somehow they.
But isn't that interesting that
yeah.
your own feelings by default have to be superseded by
Yeah,
this idea of a more powerful being?
Yeah.
And he had also had other instances in his life. Like he clearly was attracted to children.
Right. Yeah.
So and also, I mean, we all receive the social conditioning that the worst thing you can be is a pedophile for good reason. So I feel like it's just like that coming through.
Yeah. Yeah. It's dark. Yeah. Okay. So that's the reluctant pedophile narrative. Let's go ahead and go to the next clip.
After the first rape, virginity is cherished. What were your thoughts after that?
Oh, I thought I was ruined. I 100% thought I was ruined.
To the point where you didn't even know if your family would want you back.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Thought I was going to be like if I managed to survive this, if I ever made it back to civilization, would I just become a pariah?
Oh my God.
Like, how could anyone have anything to do with me once they knew the truth?
Did you?
That was Dax Shepard on Armchair Expert. Did you want to say anything about that, Alyssa?
I mean, I think it's, of course, just devastating that she's feeling not only the trauma of the rape, but is now processing just this fear that other people are going to be judgmental of her, that she's done something wrong. She mentioned in a moment, I'll just say it now, that she had never learned the difference between consensual sex and rape, that she was just taught, within a Mormon construct, don't have sex before marriage. That's all there is to it. So whether that was consensual or not was never even a part of the discussion.
Can I just ask really quickly, roll call, have any of you heard the term consent discussed in the context of sex within a Mormon context in all your decades as a Mormon?
No.
Alyssa? Never?
Never.
Taylor?
Absolutely not.
Samantha?
No, but rape was, I feel like rape was acknowledged.
It's bad.
Yeah, and not your fault.
Yeah.
But at 14, obviously,
Yeah.
in that context.
And I think one thing that I would imagine would be difficult, and she mentions this too, that she said that she knew, like, cognitively, literally, this isn't my fault, but the conditioning of the shame of sex and anything sexual, I think, is going to be superseding that. And so even if like, I had one comment, rape is bad. I've had hundreds of conversations about how sexuality is bad. I would imagine just like that's the feeling that's going to be more present, even if she knows that it's not her fault.
But especially too, because I think there is oftentimes the narrative of, but maybe she was asking for it. You think about Dallin Oaks saying that you are walking pornography if you're showing your shoulders. That's why I'm showing my shoulders today. But you could have this small part of your brain that's like, well, maybe I did do something to warrant this behavior towards me. So maybe it is my fault. I mean, and she is pretty adamant that she believed it wasn't her fault. But you can see with some of the messaging that we get time and time again that you could have these moments of, did I do something that could have, made him do this to me, that could have impacted the behavior.
Like, especially on the subconscious.
That's what I mean.
level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But also we need to, in a Mormon context, we need to tease out the feeling of, did I contribute or am I in any way to blame, with just the message that regardless of your fault or non-fault, are you damaged goods? So
Mhm.
maybe we can go to the slides for that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that is really tricky, that even if, like Sam was saying, I think within a Mormon construct, rape is bad. And I don't think that there has been a lot of emphasis on, if you were raped, that means that you're now clean. I think that, I would imagine, especially when you're 14, you're kind of going through this, there's not going to be a lot of distinction there. And we have a lot of quotes that we'll go into from apostles talking about how terrible about the terrible sin of chastity. And so I don't think, like, I wasn't ever taught, like, well, if you have sex, then it's a sin next to murder. If you have rape, it's not your fault. But I was also never taught, like, if you are raped, then you didn't actually commit the sin next to murder. You can erase it. But you're not necessarily, like, I think there's just a lot
of mental gymnastics.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It does. I mean, it is worth noting that every rape victim will feel
Mhm.
usually a
Mhm.
sense of shame, or, I mean, especially a kid, of like being dirty in some way. But it does seem like she had, like, throughout her whole story, I'm always just surprised by her strength. I feel like she's like somewhat of an aberration for a Mormon girl at that time, because she did seem to, the entirety of the time, just be like, I know that I didn't do anything to deserve that, and like that was done to me. Like, I could imagine other Mormon girls in that situation not being so firm in that.
But I do think her specific vocabulary in this clip of saying, I thought I was ruined. And of course, I'm sure she felt that, like, violation and just dirtiness that someone has, taken advantage of your body. But ruined has slightly a different meaning, like ruined in society. She thought she'd be a pariah. It wasn't that she felt dirty. It was that she thought the perception of her would be drastically affected.
And let's just jump to some quotes in scripture that Elizabeth and all of us would have experienced as Mormons, to help provide some really important context, I think, if that's okay. The first is from the Book of Mormon itself, in the Book of Alma, chapter 39, and we're going to read verse 3 and verse 5. It says, "And this is not all, my son. Thou didst do that which was grievous unto me, for thou didst forsake the ministry, and did go over into the land of Siron among the hordes of the Lamanites after the harlot Isabel." So a man is pursuing what the prophet Alma calls a harlot. For some reason, the son doesn't get called the male equivalent of harlot, but Isabel's a harlot. And then it says, "Know ye not, my son, that these things are an abomination." These things meaning sex outside of marriage. "These things are an abomination in the sight of the Lord, yea, most abominable above all sins, save it be the shedding of innocent blood or denying the Holy Ghost." And so we've covered this scripture a lot on Mormon Stories, because I believe it's part of what fueled the Jody Hildebrandt, Ruby Franke, Kevin Franke disaster. And there's a lot of these undertones in Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, Tim Ballard, etc. When you teach Mormons that premarital sex, and I think it's interpreted as even looking at porn and masturbation, it's interpreted that way, I think, for many, many Mormons, that those things are sins next to murder, that has really, really terrible and dire consequences. And just to put an even finer point on it, if that scripture in the Book of Mormon, which is canonized Mormon scripture, wasn't enough, we've got several just truly shocking and disturbing quotes from Mormon prophets, seers, and revelators, special witnesses of Christ, who add additional intensity and horror to the Book of Mormon. So we've got Mormon Apostle Marion G. Romney saying, "We would rather come to this station and take your body off the train in a casket than to have you come home unclean, having lost your virtue." So in this specific case, it's a quote given to Mormon missionaries, but Mormon missionaries were taught it's better that you come home in a pine box than having lost your virtue as a missionary. And in my mission in Guatemala in 1990, there was a missionary who sexually abused a child while dressing them for their baptism. And my mission president, Gordon Romney, cousin of Mitt Romney, shared that exact quote at zone conference to all the missionaries in my zone. That happened on my mission. So that quote's not just a past fiction. That's a quote that was shared to me.
I mean, that feels like a more appropriate application. Like that missionary had abused someone, not been abused, you know?
Yeah, but still just equating sexual transgression, not just to sin next to murder, but better off dead. But, you know, that's just one quote. We've got a couple more that are even more problematic from Elizabeth's point of view. So we've got Heber J. Grant, who is an actual Mormon prophet, saying there is no true Latter-day Saint who would not rather bury a son or a daughter than to have him or her lose his or her chastity, realizing that chastity is of more value than anything else in the world. Now, again, I don't know if we want to even bother to try and wordsmith or nitpick the phraseology there. I guess I could hear an apologist saying, well, Elizabeth Smart would never think to apply that to her because she was raped, and so she didn't break the law of chastity.
But her
Do we
virtue
wanna go there?
was taken. I mean,
Right.
that's do we want to go there? Yeah. I think a quote like that doesn't distinguish between consensual sex and sexual violence. It just says if your virtue is taken, if your chastity is lost, then it would be better to have someone be dead, which I think is just horribly heartbreaking.
I also think purity culture has a lot to answer for in terms of creating perpetrators like Brian, because again, it's sending those natural sexual impulses into the back corners of the psyche where you can't, you know, express them healthily. So then they're going to come out in more dysfunctional ways.
Yeah.
It's not good. It's not good on either end. Like, I think Mormons kind of want to have this mindset of like, well, obviously what he did was horrible and completely against the church and has nothing to do with the church because, you know, he was breaking the law of chastity and, you know, others of God's rules in doing that. But they're not reckoning with just the ways his psyche's developed, you know, with all these teachings about purity being in there. So it's like he obviously can't like face himself truly and like confront his darker impulses that may or may not be there if he hadn't received all these weird teachings about sex.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, within an apologetic framework, we can, you know, go back and forth on the semantics of whether each quote is referring to what exact instance. But I think like the impact is going to be the same regardless, especially for a child who's just going to be terrified and lonely and maybe again can rationally recognize like this isn't her fault, but that doesn't mean that like the impact is not going to be so overwhelming and so all-consuming that any sort of sexual experience that, I mean, she's been taught all of these quotes. Whether she can try and parse out assault and sexual violence from that is unclear on, you know, how capable a 14-year-old or any victim would be in that situation to be able to do that. But the feelings are going to be there. The dirtiness, not only of the assault, but of dirtiness within a purity culture context, I think is going to be so damaging.
Even just the notion that virginity is this real thing.
Yeah,
that I think even Mormons who obviously are not pro-rape, I don't know. I feel like they still would see that as like, you've lost your virginity. It wasn't your fault. It's, you know, you're innocent. But like in their minds, if a penis has been inside you, like then you're not a virgin
That's
anymore.
when the gum
Like,
gets
that's
chewed.
just like a horrifying concept.
Yeah, exactly. That it's like this very literal moment where you are versus are not a virgin. And,
Yeah.
And I want to get to the object lessons, because Elizabeth Smart in other contexts has talked about the object lessons, but we're not done with the quotes, unfortunately. So let's really quickly play a few more, show a few more quotes from special witnesses of Christ, prophets, seers, and revelators. Bruce R. McConkie, whose book Mormon Doctrine was, you know, put alongside the scriptures as scriptural canon, was quoted as saying, "Better dead clean than alive unclean," basically signaling, you know, to Elizabeth, let Brian David Mitchell kill you. That would be preferable to allowing him to rape you. I mean, that's what I would take from Bruce R. McConkie's quote. Maybe I'm being unfair there. Y'all can tell me. But Spence W. Kimball, beloved, again, Mormon prophet, seer, and revelator, "It is better to die in defending one's virtue than to live having lost it without a struggle." So literally, if Elizabeth Smart had heard that quote from Prophet Spence W. Kimball, she would have obeyed him and gotten herself stabbed and killed fighting off Brian David Mitchell. I guess maybe she didn't hear that quote or knew better to disobey hogwash.
But if it wasn't that quote, I mean, these types of narratives were ubiquitous.
Yeah.
If it wasn't that exact one, it could have been another one, I should say.
Yeah.
And even though she seemed clear on it not being her fault, she does seem to spend a lot of time in her book and in the documentary talking like explaining why she didn't like fight harder to get away, or you know, I almost at times I'm like, she's feeling the need to like explain a lot about why she did it, when it's like pretty obvious why you wouldn't fight back a man with a knife who said he's going to kill you. But
because it would be easy to say, well, you could have tried harder, so maybe you were complicit in this.
Yeah.
Were you holding still? Did you fight him back in the tent? You know, like those types of things, I think.
Because these are the types of questions too that, I mean, might be getting out into the weeds, but were you holding still? Were you, like, these are the types of questions that bishops ask in worthiness interviews, is very specifics about, well, were you thrusting your penis? Were you, you know, and that's where you get into like soaking and all of those types of things, where you can see in her mind how she does feel like she has to justify her own behavior, because there's room with that mindset of, you know, how would a Mormon look at this to potentially victim blame.
And the specifics of whether his penis was moving or not moving comes back later after and we'll talk about this toward the end, but when she was rescued, when the psychiatrists were asking her, you know, she just had to explain it so really? Literally, and her using that type of language was extremely difficult for her. Even just using anatomical terms is something that she felt deeply uncomfortable with.
Like when she got rescued, they interviewed her about this stuff.
Yes.
It was right after she was rescued. And I think
the next day.
We may have included a quote about it, but she had a moment of real difficulty, because she had been submitting to this man that had been abusive for 9 months, abusive and violent. And then she comes into a room with 2 male psychiatrists who were then grilling her. And I can't remember if I included this clip, but yeah, so we'll show that in a minute, just about how difficult it was for her to just use anatomical terms to describe things, and that in addition to having to do it to these 2 older males, that kind of thing.
That shows how far mental health awareness has come since 2002. That seems insane to interview her about that the day after. Yeah.
Well, part of what's complicated is Mormons are taught that a prophet speaks for God and Jesus, and that prophets, you know, when they profess things and tell the membership that that's as if God and Jesus are speaking. And so a Mormon youth could stumble on these quotes on the internet today and say, well, Spencer W. Kimball or Heber J. Grant or David O. McKay said that stuff. It still applies, because Mormons aren't taught that they're allowed to disbelieve a prophet's teachings if they want to. Am I wrong?
Nope. It's prophet's word is eternal.
Comes straight from God.
Yeah.
I suppose they've tried to hedge it a bit by saying a living prophet is more important than a dead prophet. And I feel like the younger you are, the slightly better teachings you've received around assault and stuff. But
thanks to the internet. Okay, so really quickly, if you thought it was just the old prophets, bearded, who said stuff like that, beloved prophet Gordon B. Hinckley said, I know what my mother expects. I know what she's saying in her prayers. She'd rather have me come home dead than unclean. So even Gordon B. Hinckley has said stuff like this.
And he was probably the prophet in 2002, right?
Yeah, that's right. Good point. That
Yeah.
was that was her
Oh,
prophet. Good point,
Wow.
Alyssa. Dark point. Really quickly, let's add insult to injury by talking about the object lessons. Do any of you want to share any sexual purity, chastity object lessons that you experienced firsthand, or did none of you experience the object lessons?
No, had the chewed gum.
Tell to just for our
object
never
lesson?
Mormons, what is
Yeah, if you have a piece of gum, that's a virtuous woman.
a non-chewed piece of gum?
Non-chewed piece of gum.
As a virtuous woman.
And then once it's chewed, no one's gonna want that. That's gross. So
And you
and
can't reverse
you
it.
can't yeah, exactly.
Once it's chewed, it's chewed.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's akin to that, the licked cupcake. If you have a delicious cupcake, but you lick the frosting, someone's not going to want to eat it after someo's already licked it.
And there's nails in the
Similar.
board. You know,
Yeah.
once the nails have been driven into the board, you can pull the nail out, but the hole remains.
Oh.
These are all object lessons that
But all have the same air of mentality of, yeah.
And I remember attempting to be slightly more progressive was the dollar bill. So you take a dollar bill and then you crumple it up and then you uncrumple it. And it's still worth the same. You can still use it. It's not like you wouldn't use it. Okay, better. But it's not going to be like a fresh, crisp bill again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's funny. That's the more progressive one. I also thought it was interesting because there was that really sad moment in the documentary where she talked about how she was worried her parents wouldn't accept her back because of the ways she'd been violated. And it seemed like pretty quickly she was like, actually, no, of course they would. My parents love me so much.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. But then it is just interesting that the examples she gave to how she'd come to that conclusion was like, well, think of all the times that I'd like, I can't remember but she described like a few instances of when she'd like, I don't know, broken something and her dad hadn't got mad at her. So it's like she was still using examples of times when she like technically actually done something wrong. Or like crushed the ATV. Was that the example? I don't remember, but she was like, and my dad wasn't mad at me then. And like, I'm just glad she reached the conclusion that her parents would still love her and accept her. But it's like, even in the line of thinking, it's like, well, when I've done things that are wrong,
They'll forgive me.
Yeah. When really you'd hope a child would feel like, oh, my parents would love and care for me more than ever because I've been a victim of this thing.
Like,
Like
I've
your
been
brain
hurt,
shouldn't
I
even
want
go
to-
to that place of like doing something wrong.
And she said that when she was first rescued, that she felt like she was in trouble. She mentioned that a few times. I mean, also she's going to the police and is being interviewed, but she said like in the first moments that she saw her dad, she worried that she was in trouble somehow, even though she knew she hadn't done anything wrong. But like, so heartbreaking that is her first feeling.
Yeah. And so if I could wave my Mormon magic wand, the church would get rid of the scripture equating sexual, behavior as sins next to murder. It would denounce all of these quotes from Mormon prophets saying that if you're impure, it's better dead than unclean. And Mormons would be taught that prophets, seers, and revelators can often get it wrong. And that if you don't like something a prophet teaches, or if it feels wrong to you, you can disbelieve it. Those would be all the object lessons about worthiness and rape culture and modesty, messages about you're to blame if you dress wrong and you're walking pornography. Really quickly, they're asking me to share a quote from Richard G. Scott, another former apostle, prophet, seer, and revelator, special witness of Christ. He's passed away. But Richard G. Scott said in General Conference, the victim must do all in his or her power to stop the abuse. Most often, the victim is innocent because of being disabled by fear or the power or authority of the offender. At some point in time, however, the Lord may prompt a victim to recognize a degree of responsibility for abuse. So that's Richard G. Scott. Any reactions to that?
Pretty gross.
Yeah. I mean, it's atrocious.
It is. That's despicable.
Okay.
And it would make sense for that to be swirling and around in her head.
Yeah.
Especially because she doesn't have anybody to confide in or process any of this with for 9 months.
Yeah.
She's just alone and coming to whatever conclusions a 14-year-old can, and then trying to use holding on to those for nearly a year. That just, I feel like, makes an incredibly difficult situation even more difficult.
Okay. Well, enough said about that.
Yeah. Let's see.
So we have a quote from her, right? Do you want to read that?
We kind of addressed it,
we did?
it already. Just that she said, I don't know how many lessons I had on don't have sex before marriage, but no one had discussed with me the difference between consensual sex and intimacy versus rape. I had a lot of shame and I felt like I was filthy. I thought if my family knew what had happened to me, would they still want me back? Maybe it would be better if nobody ever found me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. I think that is kind of covered everything that we've covered with that. I guess one other element kind of in the same topic is she explains that she was raped every day, multiple times a day, that Brian David Mitchell loved power. She said that it seemed like that was a primary motivator for him. A few other things that were happening was he was using God to justify everything, which we mentioned a minute ago. She was forced to drink beer until she threw up. He often threatened to kill her or her family, and he would withhold food.
Can I say Mormons are going to say, well, that's not Mormon. He's drinking beer. Joseph Smith drank beer and wine up until his death, served alcohol in Nauvoo and in Missouri.
Word of wisdom doesn't prohibit beer.
Yeah, or wine.
Yeah.
So
on that
doesn't
on
the word of wisdom prohibit wine? It just says mild
No.
barley drinks, doesn't it?
I mean, wine was used in the sacrament back in those days.
Yeah.
It's strong drink, meaning
coffee.
Liquor.
meaning like
Black
vodka
tea.
or whiskey or things like
Oh,
that.
so even wine.
Well, Joseph Smith drank wine the night before he was martyred
Mm.
in Carthage jail. Most Mormons don't know
I just
that.
assume he was breaking the rules because he was at the top. But
No, wine was okay back then. It was
Mm.
literally just coffee, tea, and
hard liquor.
Yeah.
Tobacco.
Yeah.
Mm.
Tobacco.
One thing that I thought was really beautiful is that she does mention that she thought about her family often, and it sounds like they did have a really great relationship, and that she knew that she had something worth surviving for. So it sounds like she went through, really intense bouts of depression and something that she's still struggling, of course, with the ramifications of all of this. But she did have, like Sam was mentioning, this tenacity, as terrible as that sounds, but that she did, have a close connection with her family that she was trying to remember and was trying to stay alive for.
Yeah.
I guess I just wanted to also mention that Mormonism, so much of that is, we're just thinking about how Mormon is this. The power that Brian David Mitchell is seeking is unfortunately very Mormon. The Mormon church is built upon the oppression of women and on rising the ranks through power. And so and also just modern society at large really values power. And that's just something that is coming out sideways here and in the Mormon church generally.
Yeah. I mean, people don't like the word sometimes, but patriarchy, right? I mean, it was a classic patriarchy where Brian David Mitchell makes the rules, makes the decisions, rules for thee, but not for me. And even not just Elizabeth, but Wanda Barzee, that, the women go along with the man making the decision. That's kind of how Mormonism is structured, even in 2026.
Yeah. Wanda's in such an odd position here because she is simultaneously an abuser and a victim. And we don't really dive much into her in the documentary, but yeah, I think that's just she's both a victim of him and of the patriarchal structure, and he is the one that holds more of the power. And she also is a bystander to serious abuse and pushes it onto her as well.
I mean, she's to Brian David Mitchell what Emma Smith was to Joseph.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
Well, I always thought that Emma Smith was more kept in the dark about a lot of it. Like, I didn't imagine Emma Smith being there, encouraging him to go forward with rape.
See it
Yeah.
Well, I guess it depends on at what point, because at some point, Joseph, after about 22 wives, Joseph did introduce the principle to Emma, and she went with it for a couple of his wives, and then later backtracked and then denied that he ever practiced it. So unfortunately, Emma is both a victim and an accomplice, at least for a short period of time. And she's definitely an accomplice in the cover-up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to know what she knew. Just the story of, what's her name? Wanda, being outside the tent, you know, that feels like very close. Would Emma Smith have been that close, even if she was going along with it?
Well,
Would she
Emma
have
watched
known?
Joseph get sealed to at least, I think, 4 of his plural wives. She was in attendance and chose the women.
Mm.
And that's the story
Okay.
where Joseph had already married these 2 sisters,
But did it again.
but Emma didn't know. And then he said, okay, Emma, you can help me choose my next. And then Emma chooses the 2 sisters that Joseph had already been sealed to. So Joseph pretends to Emma like he's never married them before, brings them in Emma's presence, and then is resealed to these 2 sisters.
Which was it her Relief Society presidency, or it was people that she had called as
Emma was definitely,
I think those were the ones that were already, he was already
was
married
he already
to.
married to those?
It was
And
a
they were
double ceiling.
yeah.
I mean, there's
yeah.
so many, but yeah. Yeah, Joseph definitely married like Emma's counselors in the Relief Society, unbeknownst to her.
Hmm.
And they kept their marriage to Joseph's secret from their Relief Society president, Emma. So, but anyway, I don't know. What do you think, Sam?
I guess I'm inclined to think that Emma maybe wasn't as bad as this woman, but I truly don't know. I mean, I don't know.
No, I'm not saying as bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Wanda disrobed Elizabeth
Yeah.
to prepare her for the rape. So, I mean, we don't have any evidence that Emma did stuff like that. But we can't say Emma was all victim, I guess, is all I'm
That's
saying.
true.
But I mean, that's why I always say on Mormon stories that, in my opinion, if I could rule the world, it would be illegal to say that you are speaking for God,
Mhm.
for anybody else. If you want to say God told me that I need to do this or that, you know, that's whatever. But to tell anyone else, God told me that you need to do X, Y, and Z
Mhm.
should be illegal just because it's too much power.
Mhm.
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So if Emma believed Joseph was a prophet, if Wanda Barzee believed that Brian David Mitchell was a prophet, then they're obeying God by obeying the prophet.
Well, and to play a slightly more compassionate side too, Wanda did have a clinical aspect of mental health issues, and
Mhm.
again, not to use that as an excuse for such abhorrent behavior, but there is that element that is a piece to the puzzle that if we were to dive deeper into trying to understand her and her motivations, it might give us a little bit more information to just, you know, I think of that book, What Happened to You, that Oprah wrote, and just to think of the whole picture of her life. Certainly there would be a lot of things that we could draw upon that would make sense as to why she might find herself in a situation where she is aiding and abetting rape under the guise that it's being directed by God.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I still think it's too much power to claim God told you to tell someone else to do something.
No, I
Yeah,
agree. I
yeah.
absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think by and large, part of what just makes this story so Mormon is it is of course an extreme example of everything. It is an extreme example of rape. It is an extreme example of power abuse, literal kidnapping. But all of the elements don't exist in a vacuum, and all of the pieces individually, to varying degrees, varying severity, happen within Mormonism historically and happen within Mormonism today. And I think that's just what like the context of this. It's maybe just seems like a crazy, salacious story, true crime story, but it is all the pieces are so relevant in each part of our history and our current culture.
Another thing that came to mind as I was watching the documentary is how they comment on how in their robes, with the language that they used when they were in public, they were viewed as very strange. And if we were to, you know, go back to when Joseph Smith was alive and doing what he did, obviously they weren't necessarily wearing robes out in public, but there was a sense of spiritual revivalism at the time, and saying that you spoke for God or had visions, communions with God, that was more popular. I don't know that I would say it was more accepted, but it was just more common. And I wonder, in comparing Elizabeth to the wives of Joseph Smith, if it would have been more clear to her that this was odd and different than it would have perhaps been to Joseph's wives, because it might have been a little bit more accepted at the time. Just more of the spiritual nature of all of those things that Joseph was engaging in.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of elements of Joseph was being more similar to the time. I do remember Elizabeth saying something that it took her a while before she realized how weird Brian David Mitchell was, because he was using religious language and he didn't seem like a religious kook right away, because she grew up really religious. So him referring to God casually, referring to, being called to do things casually, didn't strike her ear as particularly strange on its own.
That's a great point.
I'll just say really quickly that we talked about all those bad quotes that we would want the church to denounce and get rid of and whatever. The Mormon church could denounce polygamy in 2026.
They sure could.
But it hasn't. So it's still in the scripture. It's still in Doctrine and Covenants, section 132. And the current prophet of the church, Dallin H. Oaks, believes in polygamy and believes that he is in a polygamous marriage right now with his former dead wife and his current wife. And the previous Mormon prophet, Russell M. Nelson, was also celestially sealed to multiple women. And the farthest that the church has been willing to go as of 2026 is to tell the world we don't practice it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But they have not denounced the practice. They have not taken it out of the Doctrine and Covenants. And so, again, I don't know if this was influencing Elizabeth Smart, but, it would have been more helpful if Elizabeth Smart grew up in an environment not where her polygamous ancestors were celebrated as heroic, but if she had been raised in an environment where polygamy was denounced as evil and terrible and bad and as a mistake. That would have maybe been more helpful to her, but it certainly would be helpful today if the church could take those steps.
Even if they would just denounce marrying children, like in theory, if these women are agreeing to it, who are like, it's a completely different thing, even for an adult woman to be kind of brainwashed into agreeing versus, it's pedophilia when it's a child. I feel, and the church doesn't make that distinction. They're just like, she was a few months shy of her 15th birthday. Like at no point are they like, Joseph went too far with this.
Yeah. The Mormon church has not denounced Joseph's marriages to 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds at all. And by the way, apologists are going to pick the words apart and say that if a 14-year-old girl has had her menstrual cycle, pedophilia is the wrong word. The hemophilia, what's the word?
Hemophilia. Yeah.
And I know.
But do we have
Taylor's cringing. Alyssa's cringing. Samantha, are you cringing?
No, I think there's like value in that distinction. Not that hemophilia is chill, but just like do we have any reason to know that every child that a Mormon prophet, apostle, leader married had started their period? I doubt it. I bet that wasn't a standard they held themselves to. No. Maybe that happened to be the case with Joseph Smith and Helen Markham, but from what we know, girls started their periods later back then, right? We in the modern age are starting our periods earlier for various reasons.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like doubling down on what you said a moment ago, John and Sam. Like, not only was everything happening with Joseph horrific, and that's just a part of our story, and everything that's happening with Elizabeth terrible. But I think it is especially impactful to victims now that the church hasn't denounced any of this. And the more in the world that we're hearing about other child abuse going on and the way that we're responding to that as a collective, I think it's so terrible. And I think the church it really needs to be responsible. They have to denounce child sexual abuse, including of their prophet. And I think it's just disgusting that the church is still unwilling to publicly say that their main leader having sex with a 14-year-old was abusive. And I think that is having ramifications now that are terrible and painful. And thinking about the victims of child sexual abuse now, living in a church where the church is still justifying the abuse of 14-year-old girls, I think is incredibly painful. I would imagine for Elizabeth and other child sexual abuse victims to find out that Joseph Smith had sex with 14-year-olds and the church is still standing by it is especially devastating. And I think it's just so irresponsible. And I mean, especially like with the Epstein's files coming out right now, we're all hearing about just horrible sexual abuse and trauma. And it just, I think, hits especially heavy for this documentary to be coming out in that same month. It's just a lot.
And weirdly, Jeffrey Epstein claims that he met with Thomas S. Monson, the prophet of the Mormon Church, or he doesn't name him, but there's an email where he says
I thought it was Jeffrey Holland. Was it?
Is
Nelson?
2009,
Okay.
I believe. And he says, I met with the leader of the Mormon Church.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I read.
Okay.
And again, I'm not saying that happened. I'm just saying that Jeffrey Epstein said he met with the leader of the Mormon Church.
And I think at the very least, if the email is accurate, that there is at least an awareness that like the Mormon Church has power and money, whether or not the Mormon Church was involved in any of the more nefarious things. Like that's where the power is in Utah, and that's well known.
And why didn't the prophet suss out with the spirit that he was
discernment.
interacting
Hello.
with the pedophile?
Yeah.
I also want to just call people's attention. We did an episode 2091 with Heidi Bruno, who was groomed as a teenage Mormon girl by her elders quorum president in her ward, who was married at the time. And he basically takes a liking to her as a teenager and grooms her to be his girlfriend. And in his mind, his second spiritual wife, very much following the practice of Joseph Smith. And if y'all want to read a really good book, read The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy by Carolyn Pearson. We're going to be interviewing her and featuring her in a week or two.
Woohoo.
Yeah, she's a legend. And she talks about how this doctrine of polygamy is still to this day haunting the church and women and men in really, really dark ways. But check out Heidi Bruno's interview where she talks about in the modern era being groomed by a Mormon leader as a polygamous wife. So it affects people today, not just Brian David Mitchell. It affects members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And it affects people to a lesser extent. I think there are really, really high rates of child sexual abuse and of women who are sexually abused. And I think notably and understandably, this story has a lot of screen time and that's important. And her case is particularly unique and has a lot of specific details that are not relevant to a lot of people. But child sexual abuse is so prevalent within the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church is continually covering it up. Sexual abuse from a patriarchal person who's doing so in the name of God is also extremely common within Mormonism today. And those elements are parts of the story that so many people can relate to.
Even just the way it, as a young Mormon girl, like knowing about polygamy kind of primes your brain because you're thinking, you have to think about, oh, if God called me to be the prophet's wife, like I'd have to do it. Or it's like setting you up for this like degree of submission to men. And like, it's just like inherently objectifying polygamy, obviously, because it's men taking a bunch of women as their wives. It's like setting up these foundations in your brain.
It's a little bit grooming.
But even outside of, I was never groomed by anyone more, anyone, but like the way it still is, it's working its way in there in a really dangerous way, I think.
But don't you think if the church were to denounce it, that it would just be a domino? I mean, to maintain the narrative of being the one true church, you can't denounce something that's currently canonized that
and
you
that
have stood by.
Prophet loved and did.
Right. So that's where the most harmful things. It's like, well, they couldn't ever denounce it or abandon it because it's crucial to the foundation of their claim as the one true religion.
And the current prophet's practicing it. So it's not going anywhere.
We no longer practice it in this life.
Elder Uchtdorf, save us. When you become prophet, Elder Uchtdorf, take DNC 132 out of the Doctrine and Covenants.
Is he next?
Well, no,
Iring's
next,
right?
but Iring's not well. So Uchtdorf comes after Eyring, and he's like 10 years younger and way more healthy.
Oh, okay.
So there's a slight
And you
hope
could have a long
that
tenure.
Uchtdorf could be prophet for 5 or 10 years with health and relative vibrancy for an 80-plus-year-old.
I think
I'd
that
go
would bring a
back if
lot
he
of
was a
comfort
prophet.
to members. Members would be very. I think Uchtdorf would be a light for a lot of, especially progressive members.
Yeah.
If he doesn't cave to the power. And
That's true.
influence, yeah. Okay, back to Elizabeth.
Yeah, so let's watch. There's just an interesting clip about Brian David Mitchell handling the jealousy of Wanda Barzee. That was from the Armchair Expert podcast as well.
All right. Let's see what Dax has to say. Kidding.
Near me.
Were you ever like try to annoy him, be like, if you're so into Jesus and God and stuff, why are you doing all the drugs?
Oh, he had a whole line of reasoning for that.
Did it help
God
him
just
think
needs to
clearly?
show us that like we're nothing. This is his way of like humbling us. But
Okay, sorry, that wasn't
no, that's
that
great.
wasn't
That's a good
Dax, but it was talking
But
about
that's true, yeah.
I did include that because I thought the way she goes, oh, he has a whole line of reasoning for that. I mean, it's like you can look at anything that was slightly off color in Joseph Smith's history, and you can see whether through revelation in the Doctrine and Covenants or otherwise, he had a whole line of reasoning for everything.
Yeah, and I just did an episode this morning with John Turner about Joseph Smith in Nauvoo in 1842, where he propositions Sidney Rigdon's daughter, Nancy, and he writes her a letter that's known as the happiness letter.
Mhm.
And literally what the letter says is what's wrong in one context, God can make right in another context. And he's grooming his colleague's teenage daughter, unbeknownst to his colleague, Sidney Rigdon. He's grooming his colleague's teenage daughter to be a polygamist with this logic that, some rules that are wrong can be right in other contexts. So that's very Joseph Smith,
Mhm.
is all I'm saying. Yeah. Okay, so that wasn't Dax Shepard.
Now it is Dax Shepard.
Which I do think is worth noting. We talked about this before we started recording, but that this is a very popular podcast. I'm sure viewers know this, but if you have watched this episode, he had her on as his 1000th episode. And when we were talking earlier about comparison of other Mormon true crimes, like people aren't having Ruby Franke or Kevin Franke as their 1000th episode. She's making waves.
Yeah,
It's great.
she is.
She's just completely impossiple not to love, isn't
Yeah,
she?
she
Like
is.
she couldn't be more likable.
She really is, and her whole presence is just
Yeah.
lovely.
Amen. I also thought Ed Smart's passion and advocacy for her and trying to help her be found
Mhm.
was very endearing. And I'm friends with Ed Smart as well.
Yeah,
So
very endearing.
he is endearing.
I'd like to be friends with him.
Yeah, he's great. Okay, let's play the next clip. This is from Armchair Expert.
Because then sometimes her jealousy would be so much that like it would be so much that like he would come out with a new revelation to try to placate her. So like it would be things like he'd come out and he'd say, oh, God has said that your glory is like that of the sun. And so I can only be with you when the sun is out. And me, that I was just more like the moon. And so he could only have me at night. He'd have like some kind of revelation to placate her that.
Ooh.
Man, I had never heard that before. But the idea of the prophet placating his wife, again,
I heard that and was just
what?
okay.
What connection did you make?
Well, Emma Smith, of course. I mean, that is so much of what he did with her. I mean, it's astonishing how stark that parallel is of
Give
just
us an
coming up
example.
with
The word of wisdom,
with
right?
yeah, exactly. Where it's like, she doesn't like this thing, but he's like, well, God told me this, so this is because you're so special that you need to be doing this for me. And just placating women through the misuse of the idea of God is just, it's a pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, if you read Doctrine and Covenants, so many of those revelations were just in response to it's damage control. Much of Doctrine and Covenants is damage control, whether it's with Emma, Oliver, Sydney, the members. I mean, that's the impetus to most of those revelations, honestly.
So let's chat a little bit more about Brian David Mitchell, who he is, the main captor. So 4 months. Or the prophet, yes.
Who's to say?
Yeah, there's really no way of knowing. He goes by many labels.
Oh, ye of little faith? That's dark. I'm sorry.
So 4 months after she was kidnapped, I mean, just the length of time that 9 months is just so long, and I just feel like that is just worth reiterating over and over again. But 4 months after she was taken, Mary Catherine, the sweet 9-year-old who is in bed at the same time as Elizabeth, they were sharing a bed, which is just devastating, was, as she describes it, flipping through the Guinness Book of World Records and suddenly just had an epiphany of who the person was that had taken Elizabeth from their bedroom, and who she calls Emmanuel. Apparently that's what he went by. He'd done some contract work on their house. Taylor covered this a little while ago. The police did not believe her because they thought it was that Richard Ricci person who had died in the jail cell. And they thought, we have all this evidence for why Richard Ricci would do it. We just have this 9-year-old's recollection of a voice from 4 months ago. They were pretty hesitant. They had her still describe like a sketch drawing. She hadn't seen him clearly, but she'd kind of squinted through her eyelashes when he was in the room. So she'd seen a glimpse of him in the dark, heard his voice, and was pretty confident this is who it was. So the police had her help them draw up a sketch. Then the police didn't think that they should release the sketch. It turned into this whole thing because they were pretty sure that it was Richard. They didn't want to release a sketch of this person who they didn't think it was. They're also worried that if it was him, it would tip him off that they were onto him, and maybe it would put Elizabeth in harm. So they were really, with this reveal that Mary Catherine was pretty confident who it was. It caused a little bit of tension within the police department. Just another interesting detail, an aside about Brian David Mitchell at this time, somewhere during this 9-month period. It must have been before this 4 month, I would assume, because that was when they kind of were onto him. But he was arrested for stealing beer from Albertsons. So they had him in jail for a moment, and then released him, which is just devastating. Anyway, he believed he was a prophet. He was a master manipulator. And we have another clip where he kind of describes that his manipulation and that he knows that. So I don't know if there's anything you want to say before the clip about him.
I want to say that in Elizabeth's book, she describes when he went to jail for this theft that she and Wanda Barzee were left for 7 days.
Oh, whoa.
Only to find out later that he was so delayed from coming back to the camp because he'd been in jail. And so from her perspective, describing just the hunger and the thirst is awful. It's heartbreaking. And
did he have the key to her? Because she was chained up at the camp. I remember, I'm not at that point in the book yet, but earlier on she's talking about how when he went into Salt Lake, she was worried because he'd take the key. So if he didn't come back, she'd be left chained there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's been a long time since I read the book, but
the book is really interesting.
It is.
It's
It's
for
really
anyone
good.
listening
really good.
who was fascinated by the documentary. Didn't really give that many details, and it is interesting.
Yeah, her book does a good job.
All right, let's go to the next clip then.
So this is Armchair Expert.
Theoretically, who knows, honestly.
All right. It's about Brian David Mitchell.
And one of the things they brought up was a letter that Brian Mitchell had written. I think it was to his mom or someone, but talking about what a good actor he was and how much he enjoyed acting and tricking people and convincing others of whatever he felt like.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so this to me makes it feel like perhaps he was less devout and was using religion kind of as a scapegoat, as a guise. We see the weaponization of religion coming up with him quite a bit. So, I mean, it's kind of unclear how much he believes it, but he does have, I don't know if it's charisma or what it is exactly, but he is able to convince people and is using that in his life.
I feel like the worst narcissists just have like such an intuitive sense of how to manipulate people. And I feel like it's like Joseph Smith, where like he knew that he was just drumming up the Book of Mormon himself, presumably, but then it's kind of like that weird blurry line where he sort of believed it, but also knew it was a scheme.
Yeah, you kind of start believing your own grandeur.
Like the grandiosity is kind of the main thing. So because when he talked about how after she would be raped, he would go pray for 45 minutes.
Right. Oh, I forgot about that. Wild.
He's obviously not doing that for show. Well, you never know, but
yeah, but there is.
He definitely seemed like a religious man, even though he's delusional. Yeah.
I mean, I've talked to John Turner endlessly about whether he thinks, as an ever Mormon scholar of Joseph Smith, whether Joseph Smith believed he was indeed being led by God and even being told by God to enter into polygamous marriages. And John Turner tends to lean towards the hypothesis that Joseph was sincere and believed he was being led by God.
I'm curious what you'll say, because you are a psychologist, like with those narcissistic types, doesn't the grandiosity kind of just lend itself to, like, it's pretty easy for them to think anything grandiose about themselves, but then there also will be that like insecurity in there, you know, where it's not like a full, I don't know, it's not like a full self brainwashing. Like they're aware that they're scheming, but it's just all kind of in the name of these grandiose ideas that they have.
Well, yeah, like Dan Vogel has put forward this idea of a pious fraud, where Joseph Smith was pious. He believed in God. He believed in Jesus. He believed in his divine calling, and he still consciously fooled people. Yeah. But the idea is you can actually find scriptures in the Bible where God fools people, where God lies to people, where God misleads people or encourages deception or genocide or whatever, or murder. So I think Joseph gleaned this idea that sometimes for the greater good, you can lie or hide or deceive or manipulate, and that God's okay with that if it leads people to belief or Christ.
Well, and then I would imagine too that when you start to accumulate power and influence, that it probably just reinforces this divine mission that you think you might have, even if there is lying or hiding involved.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Joseph did all the treasure digging before. It's like, did he genuinely believe he would find buried treasure for people? But I feel like it's that narcissist thing of, I'm just using the word, I don't know if that's like the best word, but like, I feel like a cornerstone of that personality profile is just thinking that like whatever serves you serves the divine sort of thing. Like, so.
No, it's histrionic or narcissistic. That's all a thing. And it's very possible that Joseph believed he was seeing treasure underground and believed that the spirits were removing the treasure because the people around him weren't righteous enough. It's
or
possible.
If he didn't, just like whatever he's inclined to want to do is justified because like what he wants is the most important thing in the universe. Like that's kind of the core of the grandiosity.
And that's the great Christian / religious dilemma is, what is the Holy Ghost? What are promptings from God if they're not our emotions and our thoughts?
It's whatever the prophet tells you.
Or whatever God tells you in your histrionic, narcissistic visions of grandeur, right?
I struggle to think Joseph Smith was just this like 100% believing.
No. I think he had to have committed conscious fraud in almost any scenario. The question is whether he believed when he did perpetuate conscious fraud, it was for a greater good or sanctioned by God, by trickster God.
And is it like a thing with those personality profiles where whatever lie you tell just kind of does become true to you?
For sure. Like
So
L. Ron
there's no
Hubbard,
real line.
like I've interviewed Scientologists that say that L. Ron Hubbard spent the last several years of his life in solitude, fearful that his thetan count or whatever was not optimal and that he wasn't doing well in terms of the the Thetans or Thetans that were possessing his body. You know what I mean?
Yeah, good point.
And it all started as science fiction.
And he knew it. Yeah, that's a good example.
So, yeah, coming to believe your own delusions is real for many. Yeah.
Actually, yeah, relatable.
Yeah, right. I get that. Yes, I guess I'm just kind of like spitballing about potential Mormon elements. So I think like we see, of course, within Mormonism, what we're talking about right now, about that like grandiosity, personality. And I'm also just wondering, like, I don't know how directly applicable this is for Elizabeth, but women and girls in particular are taught submissiveness and taught timidness and taught quietness. And I just think that's a really interesting kind of foil to Brian David Mitchell's like really wild persona, just that I think is kind of worth noting that that like even within this construct that it seems like she is just like her panic reaction is more of like a fear-based one, is a more submissive, quiet, not wanting to call out one that I think, of course, there's because she's a child and her own personality, and I think there is some Mormon that perfect girl culture that is likely impacting that as well.
Well, one of the most gut-punching moments of the documentary is when, for whatever reason, Brian David Mitchell decides he's going to take Elizabeth and Wanda down into the valley, and they show up at the public library, the Salt Lake Public Library. Who wants to? Alyssa, do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, should we jump to that?
Yeah.
So they go to Salt Lake to go to the library, and they're wearing these robes, which is just really interesting. And I think that kind of goes into kind of what we're also saying a moment ago about Brian David Mitchell's like grandiose persona, that like he was like, yeah, I'm just going to just waltz around Salt Lake City, like a mile away from her home, and it will be fine. And he knew, he'd been down there. He knew that there are nationwide search parties going on, that her picture was posted everywhere. He understood the stakes of this, but he just like had so much confidence in himself that he thought, I'm going to put a face covering on Elizabeth, and I'm going to tell people that God doesn't want her face to be seen, and everything's going to be fine. And he was right in this scenario. They go down to the library to look at maps, and her and Wanda are covered, and a detective comes by and is suspicious of them and kind of is pushing like,
it was like a homicide investigator.
Yeah.
Right?
Like he should be able, you'd think that he would be able to like, you know, be the one with more power in this scenario, but he's saying, I need to see Elizabeth's face. There's a girl missing. And she doesn't speak out. She's terrified. I guess Wanda like grabs her leg under the table. And it's just so devastating in this moment that like, she's right there, that if she just pulled her face down, she would be rescued. But the fear was so strong, and just the idea of punishment if something fell through was so much that she just sat there. And the detective said, I need to see her face. Brian David Mitchell said, no, only her husband and her father can see her face. It's part of our religion I just made up. And he was like, apparently he said, well, can I join your religion for a day? And he said, nope. And eventually the detective left, and she was just right there, just moments away from being rescued, and just didn't pan out. So I think that, yeah, it's just like another example of his wildness and her docility.
Also his ability to like intuit the truth, because it kind of is the perfect disguise, because it's so out there. You just wouldn't think someone would be hiding in plain sight like that.
Right.
Necessarily, with posters all around the city.
Yeah.
And it's such a tough one, because it's like, if you imagine a situation where an investigator's asking a Muslim woman to take off her hijab or whatever, like that's uncomfortable to think about.
And also just like looking at the timing of this, which Elizabeth said in something, just like added to people like not really giving them as much attention, is this was in 2002. It was shortly after 9/11. So people were more uneasy with people wearing facial coverings, and were less willing to like talk to them and give people attention. So
there was also a guy, I've lived downtown for years, and there's this, I don't know if he's still around, but he basically wore that exact outfit and would always just be walking around downtown in it. And I feel like I don't remember if abortion was something he was talking about, but he just was in like that exact outfit.
Wow.
But always alone. Just strange. And he would get off the train by my apartment just in this outfit, be like kind of around downtown all day. I'm like, because it's not quite a Mormon temple outfit.
Right.
I'm like, what is it? And why is other people still doing it?
Wasn't it funny that barkeeper? He's like, oh yeah, it was 2002. People would walk around Salt Lake in robes. The barkeeper wasn't phased by it, right?
Yeah, that was
because the barkeeper saw them too walk into the bar.
But another instance of
them
for
going
me, not they,
downtown.
but with
Yeah,
they can't have any alcohol, but I can.
but Brian David Mitchell could.
I have his like the bartender's like little story about like, yeah, we had great acid. I'm like, why did you include this in the documentary? This is such an odd, like unnecessary detail.
Mushroom tea. Mushroom tea. He said.
I mean, it's great, man. Like, we only have an hour and a half. There's so much of Elizabeth's story, but like, let's spend like a full minute talking about the mushroom tea.
It does kind of just highlight the wackiness of the party and why you probably, if people are in costume, you're like, maybe it's a kink thing, maybe like who knows? Like, there's a lot of weird stuff happening.
I do want to say that I do think that, in 2026, I think we're all looking at the democratic experiment that is America to try and see what have we done right? What have we done wrong? Where have we overreached? And I do think there's an argument to be made that we have created excessive protections for religions in America. Yes. The fact that the Mormon Church is worth $500 billion, but remains a tax-exempt organization when it's clearly a super wealthy corporation. And the fact that this homicide investigator was afraid to like look under the mask of a girl because some kook bearded weirdo walking around with two women who were veiled faces in 2002 said, sorry, you can't, religious freedom. I think, and by the way, who is it that's one of the largest advocates for and lobbyists for the protection of religious rights in the United States? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, along with Scientology and the Jehovah's Witnesses. And so like, I think it's a problem. And this is an example of it being a problem, along with all the Boy Scout and child abuse instances that somehow don't even reach the police because of all the protections we have about the clergy, penitent privilege, like way too many protections. And the Mormon Church not only benefits from these protections, but pays for them and buys off politicians and legislatures and Supreme Court justices to perpetuate those protections.
And it does feel like religious freedom always comes above child's rights. Like the number of evangelicals in America that teach like hitting children from when they're babies as like a part of their core doctrine. And then all of these like church-funded homeschooling organizations that are lobbying to basically just make it even harder for like teachers, for example, to like protect kids. Like there was a law that said you couldn't like pull a kid out of school and homeschool them if you're like under investigation for child abuse. So I actually can't remember all the specifics, so I might be saying that wrong. But like the homeschooling and like hitting your kids evangelical world is so disturbing and like so much more powerful than I feel like we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like why would we allow people to hit their kids when we know for a fact at this point that it's psychologically damaging to them because religion?
Well, the Old Testament has those clobber verses. The Old Testament is for beating your children.
Yeah.
It just is. Yeah.
What was the country that just made it illegal to teach your kids that they're going to hell? Was it Germany?
Oh, wow. Interesting. I didn't hear that.
Basically saying threatening a kid with hell is now considered child abuse.
It is.
Love that.
Yeah. All right. So I guess there's a video on the library encounter. Should we play that really quick?
From her perspective, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is a gut punch for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, the manual, he explains to the cop that their religion forbids her to show her face, that the only people that are ever allowed to see her face are her father and her future husband.
Okay. And the police officer said, fine.
Yeah, and I just
I mean, he pushed. He was like, well, can I just convert to your religion for a day?
Oh,
Like, if you just let me see her face, you know, anyone else who calls, I can assure them that, you know, she is who you say
Right.
she is. Like, just let me see. I mean, he did push.
Huh.
Like, he did try.
I want to follow that up by saying that she goes on to talk about the guilt that he felt over this interaction. And I believe at the time of this interview, I think he's passed away. I think she goes on to say that he'd passed away. Because I think that is a common question for people hearing about this scenario. Be like, she was right there. Why didn't you push more? And it breaks my heart for this officer in this case, because he was stuck between a rock and a hard place and was trying to do the right thing. But, you know, it ended up just not going the way that the world had hoped. But
and it's kind of the kind of situation that you could imagine ending up being a Supreme Court case. Like, it's not like an easy, again, when you think of it with like Islam or a more established religion, it's like, that is a really tough one. Like, I actually don't know what the precedents are there, but that could easily be like a massive thing. Also, someone said something about me conflating homeschool.
Yeah, we have a viewer listener
Let
that
me
feels
just
like
clarify that.
Samantha said that homeschoolers beat their children. So
no, I was not conflating homeschooling with hitting kids, but it's a lot of the homeschooling associations that are like rallying for these weaker laws that basically make kids like less protected. So obviously people can homeschool and not hit their kids. I'm just saying there's abuse is more scary as well when a kid doesn't even have access to like the wider world, like in school. And, you know, homeschooling plus abuse is obviously like magnifies.
And I think
abuse.
there are many like homeschool curriculums that are based in like Christian nationalism.
Yeah. It does seem like most efforts to homeschool in America tend to be Christian nationalists.
And I've seen some like within that do kind of like promote, even if they'll say they don't promote hitting, they promote discipline that is physical.
Yeah,
to an extent that is hitting, but they
just that like breaking a child's will kind of line of thinking that can happen in religion.
Well, I'm just going to say that we did an episode on Mormon Stories podcast, episode 2057. It's with Camille Lewis. She was an independent fundamentalist Baptist. She was a professor at Bob Jones University, and they allow corporal punishment in their preschool at Bob Jones University. And the reason why she parted with their church is because as a professor at Bob Jones University, she needed the daycare at the university to watch her kid. And they wanted her to sign a waiver giving them permission to beat her children if they so chose. And she refused to sign that waiver, and she lost her job at Bob Jones University. And I'm not saying that's in any stretch all evangelical Christians, but there absolutely is a branch of fundamentalist Baptist, the IFBs, who are prone to homeschool and who are prone to believe that it's sacred to use corporal punishment on your kids. So not all homeschoolers, not all evangelical Christians, not all Baptists, but tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of independent fundamentalist Baptists who also homeschool their kids. Check out episode 2057 of Mormon Stories, Camille Lewis. Julia will include that in the show notes. Yeah.
And this was just kind of another aside, just a bonus Mormon content moment, but just that I thought was interesting. Ed Smart said that about 6 months after Elizabeth had been taken, that he overheard some people in the Mormon temple, say to each other, like, can you believe that Ed Smart still believes that Elizabeth is still alive? And I think that kind of goes to show, you know, Ed, just throughout this documentary, he's such a sweet character. He just shows just so much love and devotion to Elizabeth and belief that she will be rescued even when everybody else had stopped. But I just imagine that to be especially heartbreaking to hear in the Mormon temple, within like your most sacred space, from your community, from people that like you're hoping are on the same team as you, losing hope. And yeah, I just thought that was probably a really difficult moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the case continues. We're, I think, at about 6 months-ish now, maybe a little further. So Mary Catherine has identified who Emmanuel is. They've drawn up a sketch of him. And eventually the family just decides to release the image, even though the police say that it's a dangerous idea, which we touched on a moment ago. They say, you know what, we're going to do a Hail Mary. We're going to release this. We don't think it's Richard Ricci. We think that she's out there. And we think that we really believe our daughter. We believe this eyewitness account. And when the image is released, Brian David Mitchell's brother-in-law sees the image and recognizes his brother and calls in, and they're able to get the name.
Can I ask maybe a dumb question? Well, I don't know. How are they able to hear a 9-year-old's account of what a man looks like and be sketching and then have that resemble the man? Like,
Well, I want to say they also had input from family that were there as he was working on the home.
okay.
Still, I can't imagine trying to draw something based off people's words, but I
Yeah,
think they
okay.
had more than just her description,
Okay.
from what I understand.
That makes more sense.
I wonder that a lot about police sketches, but they're a thing. So, yeah.
And Elizabeth made a comment that she felt like the sketch was not very close to how he actually looked. But it must have been close enough for the brother-in-law to notice.
Yeah.
I think that with the context of the mountains and that kind of thing definitely
And was he
gave.
going by Emmanuel when he worked on the house?
Yes.
So-
Well, not when he worked on the house, but his
Oh.
brother said that he would go by the name Emmanuel. So I think that was another key factor.
Brian David Mitchell's ex-wife reached out at this point as well and confirmed that he was hyper-religious and dangerous. And so I think that at this point they felt really confident that he had her and that she was in some sort of danger, but that he was probably the guy. So now they really are setting out saying everybody needs to find him in particular. And they had their eyes on the suspect. After she was almost found in the library, this spooked Brian David Mitchell, understandably. And so they fled to San Francisco, which ended up being San Diego, which ended up being really important in the case because it crossed state lines for child sex. Yeah, trafficking. Yes. So this ended up playing a big role in the trial. And this I think is where I'm really proud of Elizabeth. Well, I think we all are. They were wanting to go to another big city, and Elizabeth said that she suspected that if they left somewhere else, that it would be even more difficult for her to be found. That she had the highest likelihood of being found in Salt Lake.
They were going to go back east, I think.
Yeah. And by then it had been longer, and she could just blend in with everybody. So she,
this is great.
Was really appealing to Brian David Mitchell's ego. She really knew her audience and said, you are such an amazing prophet. You are working through God. God has told me that you are really divine. And he has also told me that we need to go to Salt Lake. And he believed that she was finally part of his religion, and was just so flattered that by what she was saying, that he was like, all right, let's do it. Let's go to Salt. Let's go back to Salt Lake.
God told you I'm awesome.
Exactly.
Then if God told you we need to go to Salt Lake, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And this really was a game-changing moment because they will be found after that. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's amazing that Elizabeth had the intuition as, a young child to be I'm going to, use your manipulative tactics against you. I'm going to use this religious language against you. Really perceptive.
Her saying that.
I know.
She's such a badass.
Yeah.
She really is.
She's incredible. As a 14-year-old girl to be able to do that is remarkable.
What do you think made him not, other than his ego, not see through it and be willing to go back to Salt Lake? Because you would imagine that he would recognize that's great. But do you think it's because he was from there, so he was probably finding it difficult to navigate a new area, and so it was I guess it would be easier to be back where I know? So I was just how did that work? Off? Yeah.
Well, I think at least some narcissists are vulnerable to flattery.
Yeah. Well, and after she hadn't engaged in it for the entirety of the kidnapping, to finally say, because I think the context she gives is she had just drank so much beer that she'd thrown up and woke up in her own vomit, and used that as a way of saying to him, I now realize my own nothingness. You are, really used it as an opportunity to just stroke his ego and reiterate some of the messaging that he had just continuously told her. So yeah, I think it was this first instance of flattery. He felt like he'd succeeded in
Mm.
converting her to the cause or to the religion, perhaps. And
I guess she'd been out in public with him several times now, and she wasn't trying to run away. So
Right.
yeah, she wasn't bound at that point.
So when it was working to an extent. And I mean, I guess Utah mountains are just, he was like, well, we've been able to stay hidden for so long. I think he probably just got a little bit cocky and thought it would be fine. But yeah, so impressive that she was this far along in enough of a headspace to be able to advocate for herself in this way. Just, I think, yeah, she's just incredibly impressive.
When we talk about her impressiveness, and we're now touching on something we started talking about, like, I would have expected that at some point she started believing in him being an actual prophet, but apparently she says she never did. Is that what y'all are saying? And if that's true, the fact that she went along and played the long game, never believing in him, always knowing she was being abused, but that she used wisdom and wit and patience to not get herself killed, but instead to fool him, to put them back in the path of getting
It's a
found.
14-year-old girl.
That's just legendary.
Yeah,
Truly.
It really is.
Truly.
I do think it says like something great about her parents, like that she had 14 like healthy years under her belt.
Yeah.
You know?
Didn't she say she never doubted her dad's love or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she did comment on a number of occasions just how she wanted to plan her rescue and she wanted to guarantee that it would work. And so, like if they were coming down from the mountains when they were still in Utah and they were to pass runners or hikers, in her mind, because it sounds like she gets the question a lot of, well, why didn't you run? And her answer seems to be, I wanted to guarantee that it would be a success. And so I think, John, you nailed it by saying she was playing the long game and thinking, how can I guarantee that this will work? Which is so impressive for a person that age to be able to think that way, especially under such duress.
It does seem like he was able to, what's the word? I don't know, instill more fear in her over time. Like I feel like right at the beginning, if she was in that police incident in the library, she probably would have said something.
Yeah.
But by that point, because even when she was eventually found by the police, it seems like she was kind of reluctant because she didn't fully
Still
trust
wary.
the situation. So it was good that those police kind of pushed it.
Yeah. So it seems like perhaps her brainwashing wasn't that he was a prophet and that he
just,
you know,
It was just
true.
that he was powerful
Yeah.
and could threaten and potentially kill.
Yeah.
Her
And
loved
9
ones.
months, like that probably would have got worse if she would have been, like, it seems like she was kind of on the cusp of maybe losing those faculties more and more.
Yeah.
I don't want to give too much attention to a potential bad actor or non-credible commenter, but judge for yourselves. Robert Wingett writes, David Mitchell and Wanda did not belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Saying all of these three were Mormon may be technically true, but is misleading. What do y'all say in response?
I mean, if that article in the
I think that's
Tribune
wrong.
said that Brian David Mitchell was acting in the
Yeah.
temple ceremonies in the Salt Lake Temple, we would have had to have been a member.
Yeah.
He was a temple worker, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess it could have been possible that by the time he's walking around in robes with the beard, he had been excommunicated for adultery or abuse or
Do we know?
apostasy.
Yeah.
He was
So-
definitely a member of the church at one point.
But
I
yeah.
mean, he was
Like,
raised
potentially
Mormon and a believing Mormon.
Yeah.
And like, I wish I could have a conversation, I guess, with Roger, but he definitely believed Joseph Smith was inspired and a prophet of God. He definitely believed in the Book of Mormon, and his polygamy came from Joseph Smith. And he
Because
was
it was
raised Mormon.
one of his canons that he had. Was it seven works of scripture that
Yeah,
some of which were his, but the Book of Mormon was one of them.
yeah.
Yeah. I think the discussion on whether Brian David Mitchell was an active believer at that point is less interesting than looking at how the influence that it did have on him, which it did. We know that it
Yeah.
did have on him and Wanda. I think that finding like the specific details of like where his faith was at feels less interesting than like what this says about the larger Mormon culture.
And was he raised in Mormonism?
Mhm.
And was he raised with the belief in Joseph Smith that polygamy is divine, that God speaks to people through their emotions? Was he influenced by his Mormon upbringing,
Right.
Roger? I think is the interesting, relevant question here. Not whether technically his membership had been
Yeah.
canceled.
It's like
you
we
know?
all know that the church didn't support this. The church would never be
Right,
okay
right.
with this. No one's arguing that. But if a brain is forged in the fires of Mormonism, there's no separating it. And whether the consequences were unintended or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so they say let's return to Salt Lake, so they do, and from everything that I've heard, it sounds like it was pretty quickly when they returned that she was able to be rescued. So they're walking around Salt Lake, and he says at the time, like, once we go back into the mountains, we're going to be in there, because he was still a little bit nervous about her getting found, and he was like, we're not going to let you get back anymore. So here's your one last walk downtown in our robes.
They're in Sandy, right? Aren't
Yeah,
they
they're in Sandy.
Yeah.
They're
State
walking
Street.
down State Street. Just wild. That they were just out and about like this. But a caller recognized him, called the police, and said, I think we've found the guy. And multiple police officers came down and approached them and said, we think this is Elizabeth. And they like asked her, and she wouldn't respond. They asked her multiple times, and her response, finally, the closest thing to like a confession of disclosing who she was she said, thou sayest. And he said, great, we'll take that as a yes, and took her to the police station, and she was rescued from there.
What'd y'all think of thou sayest? She felt like she had to justify that a little bit.
Yeah. And hearing the context makes sense, right? Like Sam said, was living in so much fear. And at that moment in time, wondering, is this going to work, or am I going to have to go back with them? And if I do, I don't want to be punished. And so her thought with using those words was, if they overhear me, they're not necessarily going to make the deduction that I've admitted who I am. Instead, it seems like I'm still keeping up the facade. By the way, it looks like Brian Mitchell and Wanda were both temple workers. She played the organ. She was an organist in the temple. So they...
Feels relevant.
Yeah.
Roger.
And we should note that thou sayest are the words of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
When people would say, you claim you're the Son of God, is that true? Jesus' response was, thou sayest.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
That does make me think again that she was losing herself by
Yeah.
that point.
Mm-hmm.
To not, because even at 14, you should be able to recognize, like, well, these policemen have guns and, I'm safe now.
But I think she was worried that, like at the library, somehow
Mm-hmm.
Brian David Mitchell could do these are not the droids you're looking for, and then she'd get beat or raped more back at the tent, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So once she's rescued, this is when she talks a little bit about her difficulty in describing what happened. And I think trauma-informed care has come a long way in the past couple of decades. But yeah, let's play the next clip and she'll chat about that.
All right. This is actually a clip from Netflix kind of extra, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had like a corresponding podcast.
After I was rescued, when I was being interviewed by those two psychiatrists, like I went in there and they're like, okay, so what happened? And I was like, well, I was molested. And they're like, okay, but can you explain it? And then I was like, well, I was raped. And they're like, well, yeah, but can you describe the rape? And I was like, well, he forced himself inside of me. And they're like, we need you to say exact body parts. Can you please use the anatomically correct names? And so then I had to get to a point where I said he forced his penis in my vagina repeatedly. And that for me was just so embarrassing and like difficult. I mean, for one, using the correct body part names, just because, I mean, they were your privates. Like, they weren't penis and vagina in my house growing up. They were your privates.
Any comments on that? We didn't say, urinate. We said tinkle. We didn't say penis and vagina in my house. I don't know. That's probably not uniquely Mormon.
No, we didn't in my house either.
Yeah.
But I do think that
You were raised not LDS.
Yeah, non-LDS. But it does obscure abuse when you don't teach kids the proper words. Like making them feel like you have to obscure the names. I think that's a really bad call. I feel like society's changing its mind on that now. But
yeah, I think the official recommendation is to teach your children the anatomically correct terms and to use that, and I can help prevent abuse and at least describe it. But yeah, I mean, I think just a layer that is so difficult about this is she talks about quite a bit is like the embarrassment and the shame. I mean, I think we talk a lot about like the pain and the sadness and the fear, but I think what is an overwhelming emotion that she refers to is the embarrassment.
She's more concerned with other people's perception of having to
and
hear her use those words.
And I think that comes from both like a really purity culture, conservative upbringing, and being a child. And I think those two just really come to a head in that. After everything that she has been through for 9 months, and we talk about her bravery and just the repeated rapes over and over again, and being chained to a log or a stump or whatever. And then for her to then suddenly she was like a little girl again, embarrassed to say the word penis. Like it's just, I think that really kind of hits home too, where the severity of where she was at.
Shocking that they had men do that interview as well.
Right? Yeah. And
I think she mentions that probably due a lot to the advocacy work that she's done, that now in situations like that, they require like I'm not going to speak very well on it, but a female psychologist who is trauma informed to be able to at least be in on those questions if a man has to come and do any type of investigating.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and she says, when I came back, I was scared of men. I was scared of a lot of things, and I still didn't hear anyone speak about being raped or being abused. It was not a common conversation, so I felt a lot of shame and embarrassment around what happened, even though I knew it wasn't my fault.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And she talks, I don't remember if we include anything about this or not, but she talks at one point about how like meeting with the two psychiatrists was particularly re-triggering because they were like two men, and she knew that they were religious, I think LDS, but like kind of like re-traumatized her from being with Brian David Mitchell, who like was in like such a religious headspace, to have to talk about this with the two men. Anyway, and so I think that also just plays a little bit of a part in her relationship to faith, which we'll get to in a second.
I was stunned that the trial took 10 years.
Yeah, why? Like,
well, I think you mentioned in the notes that part of it is he claims an insanity defense, which is convenient when you're not caught. You're just acting under faith, and you're religious, and
right.
You get protected by religion. And then when you're caught, well, you're not acting under religion. You're insane.
Well, and that's why I wanted to include that clip of her referencing this letter, whether it was to his mom or another relative, of him saying what a great actor he was. You know, I think it's especially relevant to the case as it went on, and it sounds like it was when she alludes to it, that it just wasn't a fair claim to make for him and his team.
Well, and I feel like anyone who would do that is insane to whatever degree, but it's like, but this is what the justice system is. Like, if we're going to put anyone in prison for those things, you kind of have to put everyone in.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to be a good member of society.
Yeah. Fair. But how excruciating for her to have to endure a 10-year trial. Like, I had a 2.5 year legal thing, and it was torturous.
Yeah.
Well, and then to come up with the threat of the statute of limitations too, and feel the pressure there of saying, what if this does just end up going away without justice? Yeah. Which I think is another huge impact of her work, to now that doesn't apply in child sexual violence instances.
How does pleading insanity buy you that many years?
There's probably other stuff too, you know.
What, you just like do legal rigmarole for so long?
Which is just, I mean, I think maybe that just kind of goes to show like how little care goes to so many victims, that she was had all the resources. You know, she had an affluent family. We knew exactly who kidnapped her. It was a national story, and it still took 10 years for there to be any sort of justice. Like, that's part, I think, of why like so few people will report and will come forward, because any sort of like justice in the legal system is just so rare. And it still took a decade for this, when they knew exactly what had happened. Nobody disbelieved him. They saw all the things you know, she was a child. She was literally kidnapped, and she still almost didn't he was almost free.
And the other heartbreaking element is if you add in, I mean, obviously the difficulty of just a secular justice system, but when you also add in the element of sexual abuse cases that occur within the church, where it goes to the church headquarters, the church legal team first, before it even can get to a point where it could be a topic on a secular level. And it's just another added layer of when you don't have the resources and the time, that victims, and obviously this is different because it's not something that happened within the church necessarily, but it's just heartbreaking to think of all of those victims that are just buried in the barriers that are amplified because of how the church handles and structures sexual abuse claims.
Yeah.
I Googled some of the reasons why it took so long. There were the competency hearings to decide whether he was competent to stand trial. There was jurisdictional conflict where the federal government was supposed to try it for trafficking reasons.
Because he came over state lines?
They drugged their feet. And so the federal trials delayed the local trials, apparently, or something to that effect. Wanda Barzee had to have her own separate competency findings. So there were multiple people involved. That Mitchell acted in a manipulative, squirrely way that drew things out. There were a gazillion appeals and motions. Yeah. Even simple legal matters take 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
Sometimes more. And that's just simple ones, not murder cases or child trafficking cases. And then, yeah, it mentions the complexity of mental health law. You know, so those are some of the reasons. So,
and it says a lot because it's like she was, by America's standards, the perfect victim. And like they still hung, you know, she had to go through that for 10 years. Like she wasn't able to get that closure for 10 whole years, even with all those resources being the perfect victim, you know.
Yeah.
And it still was like
99% of rape victims don't even report their perpetrator to the police because they know that they'll, you know, it'll take forever and they'll probably lose.
Right.
Yeah. And drain their resources in the process.
Their own
resources. Yeah. Whatever they have.
Yeah. I'm super sorry. We need legal reform, but whatever. Yeah. The sky's blue.
Okay, so let's chat a little bit about what happened afterward. So eventually, I guess the trial, he was in prison. What was it? 15 years to life? No, life.
He got life without parole.
And I think Wanda Barzee was 15.
And she's out.
She's out.
But she went back in, I think.
Oh, did she?
Well, she violated parole. She actually came through. My father-in-law works at a halfway house, and she came through the halfway house, and I believe was near a playground.
Yeah, she showed up at Sugar House Park a couple months ago.
That's what it was, and was violating her parole.
Wait, recently? A few months ago?
Yeah, like very recently.
So she was out for like 7 years or something, and then
because she
showed
got
up
out
to
in
a playground?
2018. Isn't that creepy?
Yeah.
Anyway, so
I wonder why
that happened. Yeah, Elizabeth talks about how, you know, how difficult it has been to process everything, that she's had a really supportive family, but that was a really big part. She says that her mom was really supportive and helpful. She was notably not in the documentary much. She's mostly wanted to just leave the past in the past at this point. I think that has been her kind of like trauma response is wanting to talk about it less. Whereas like Elizabeth and Ed have the Elizabeth Smart Foundation and they do a lot of advocacy work. So she talks about how she began speaking out and is trying to find something good that comes from it. She said, everything that happened couldn't take away from my worth. Those monsters couldn't take that away from me. And I just think it sounds like, I mean, that's a lifetime of trauma to process. But she has really trying to use that as a way to build advocacy and continue to support survivors. So we have I guess, do we have anything we want to say about that?
A lot of people, there was even an article about why wasn't Lois, Elizabeth Smart's mom, involved in the documentary. And yeah, that reason was given that she just wanted to put it behind her. I think it's more complicated than that. Something that's worth mentioning is that just in the past 5-10 years, Ed Smart came out as gay, very courageously. And I believe, that ended his marriage to Lois. Because I'm friends with Ed, he invited me to his wedding. So I was at his wedding where he married his partner. That was a joyous marriage in Camas, which has been made famous by Ballerina Farm. That's where Ed Smart was married to his current husband. But so happy for Ed. But my sense is that was not a harmonious end to their marriage. And so I'm also sure that Lois's non-involvement might have had something to do with all of that as well. Because I don't think Lois took Ed's coming out very well.
She's really
Super
devout
Orthodox
Mormon.
and devout Mormon.
That's got to be so insane to reckon with your daughter having that happen to you and then being a part of the Mormon church still.
Yeah. Especially if she knows anything about Joseph Smith.
Yeah, well, she
Right.
must know that now. Maybe in 2002 she
Maybe.
didn't.
But I mean, again, check out my interview with David Archuleta because, again, February 17th, we're releasing it. David Archuleta serves this mission like 2011, 2012 timeframe. And then like he knows he's gay on his mission because he has attraction to missionary companions, comes home, right? What happens as soon as he comes home? The November 2015 policy comes out. And then like Dan Reynolds and Tyler Glenn and me come out with that Believer documentary. And through all of that, David Archuleta was just like, I didn't watch it. I didn't process it. I wasn't angry. It didn't question my faith. Because why? Because as a believing Mormon, even though he was gay and struggling with it, he tuned all of that out because he was in such a bubble. And he was in a ward with Dan Reynolds, like in Hollywood, before Dan Reynolds ever became famous. But he wasn't interested enough to watch Dan Reynolds' documentary all the way through about being gay and Mormon. Like the Mormon bubble is real and profound. So I guess we have to cut Lois some slack.
And I imagine like people's trauma responses are going to be so different for her. It sounds like, I mean, that I would imagine that having faith in a religion is like a reason to cling to give some meaning. I do remember in Elizabeth Smart's book, which again, it's been like a decade since I've read it. I should have reread it before this, but alas. But she like said at the time when she published it, she was still like really active from my impression. And she was talking in it about how like her relationship to God and her relationship to the church really helped her come through it. And I am really glad that she had that. Like she talks about how, well, one thing that I thought was really notable that kind of is a little bit contradictory to Mormon theology. And she said that she didn't believe that God had that like preordained for her, that like, because I mean, of course, so much of Mormon doctrine is like everything happens to you for a reason, and like God wanted this to happen to you. Everything that you go through is from God. But she pretty quickly deconstructed that and said, God did not want this to happen to me, that it was because of like Brian David Mitchell's own agency that this happened. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. This wasn't like God didn't send me to earth to be like, and you're going to be kidnapped and raped for 9 months. And so I think like, even from a Mormon perspective, she was able to deconstruct that. But then she did really use like her relationship to God as like a connection to get herself out of it. And so perhaps Lois feels that connection and is her like way of processing. But I guess we can kind of use that as, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just thinking about how most Mormon women will become mothers while they're still in girlhood. And like that alone is such a massive thing. And just imagining that she's, at least ostensibly, got this perfect Mormon family. They've got this massive house, big, happy family. She's probably still in girlhood too, psychologically, because most people are at that age. And then you have that happen to your daughter. And then later you find out your husband's gay. Like, what a crazy, like, I mean, that would just shatter like your entire psychological foundation. So it makes sense that the church would sort of stay standing as like the last remaining structure.
There has to be something.
Yeah. Because that's a lot.
Lois and Ed and Elizabeth probably all prayed to God saying, save us. And she was saved.
Yeah.
So that's going to be reinforcing to faith potentially. Right.
Yeah. And that like God worked through Mary Catherine to remember Brian David Mitchell. Like I'm sure there's a lot there.
And there was some genuinely interesting like
miracles. Or
extra
cup of water
stuff.
And Ed's vision and
What's the cup of water thing?
It was in the book, just where she was so thirsty and found a cup of water.
Oh, I haven't got
outside.
to that. But yeah, Ed like knowing that she was still alive somehow.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I guess
I
maybe.
mean, it's a miracle she was found.
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
she
it doesn't
lived,
normally
Yeah.
happen.
It really
and
is.
she wasn't killed by that crazy guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I guess just kind of wanted to address, so she's been like, had been really vocal about her relationship to Mormonism, and like was a very active member, and was so devout at the time of the kidnapping, and her family seemed just like the perfect Mormon family. Her relationship to religion has shifted a little bit. She hasn't
I'll just
talked
say,
about it a
over
ton.
the years, I've tried to interview her,
Oh,
and there were many, many years where she was still, if not an Orthodox Mormon, she was temple married, as I understand it. I think
Yeah.
she was raising her kids as Orthodox Mormons, at least for a time. She was at Ed Smart's wedding, and I don't know how originally supportive she was of her dad coming out as gay, but my sense is that I know for sure Ed lost his Mormon faith.
how long ago was this?
A few years ago.
Roughly? Okay.
I think right around COVID or right before COVID,
Oh,
I
okay.
think.
So
Ed
not
Smart,
that long ago.
within 5 or 6 years, Ed reached out to me when he was thinking about coming out around 2018, I believe, 2017, 2018. And then came out within a year or two of that. But yeah, I don't want to speak for Ed, but my sense is Ed doesn't believe anymore. And that I don't know how Elizabeth originally felt about her dad coming out as gay and marrying a man. She was at the wedding. She did act supportive, but I can't imagine how her dad leaving the church and coming out as gay has not affected her. It has affected her.
Well, and she says it all came out at once. It was like an early phone call, and he just says, "I'm divorcing your mom, I'm gay, and I'm leaving the church." Just all in one
Yeah.
fell swoop. And yeah, I'm sure that
Yeah,
has at least been a factor over the years.
for sure. Sorry, Alyssa. I
No,
interrupted.
great. So we just have a little clip of what she said about her current relationship to faith
All right. Yeah.
from the Netflix
Let's go ahead and play it.
podcast.
How's your relationship with faith these days?
Just because someone tells me something doesn't mean I believe it. I don't want to say I'm a cynical person because I
Mhm.
don't think I am, but that also doesn't mean that I just believe blindly anymore.
How is it with raising a family and still being in Utah and all of that? How is that for you?
I feel like I'm pretty open with my kids and that I want them to find out for themselves. And if whatever their decisions are, I want them to know that like I'll support them, but I just want them to really think about what they believe, think about what they accept into their life. Is that something that that truly means something to them, or is that just because everybody else is going that?
Can we determine her status in Mormon belief by that statement or not? You're smiling, Taylor.
I mean, and it was interesting to watch that clip contrasted with Dax Shepard asked her the same question, and she essentially gave the same answer with the lead in saying, "I'm so grateful for my Mormon upbringing. I'm so grateful for my family. I'm grateful for the values that it taught me and for the strength that it gave me," and has so many positive things to say about the Mormon upbringing, but then says something similar in that she doesn't believe blindly. She's a little bit firmer in this clip in saying, "I want my kids to choose what they believe and it feels good, not because everyone else does or someone tells them to." If she isn't out, I feel like that is one of the very distinct phases of
And
being a
exit.
Mormon and then being progressive and then
Mhm.
eventually leaving.
Yeah, when Margie and I didn't believe anymore, and even after our excommunication, I would say we still want our kids to choose for themselves. So Taylor, I'm going to ask each of you this: what's your percentage certainty that she's no longer guessing that she's no longer believing and or active? What's your percentage
Man,
likely
I
to
mean,
guess?
obviously there are those interviews that she can speak for herself. I dove down a rabbit hole yesterday into Reddit, and people are commenting, "We haven't seen her in church. Why isn't she in church?" I mean, I would say it's likely if I had to give a percentage. I don't know, 80 to 90%
Okay.
based off the firm answer she gave there. Or if it's lower, it's moving upward.
Okay.
And not that either choice is correct, but just based off, what I've consumed in terms of content.
But those are the words of an Orthodox devout believing
Absolutely.
Mormon.
Those are not.
I've heard Chad Daybell, or I'm sorry, Chad Frankie being interviewed. He says something very different when he answers that question.
What does he say?
Is he devout?
Yeah, he's still very much
interesting.
doesn't criticize the brethren, still believes.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that's what he tells people anyway.
Interesting.
Alyssa, what's your guess? You're reading the tea leaves of her words.
Yes. Yeah, I would say similar. I think that it seems important to her to not like be presented as an ex-Mormon or to have that as part of her narrative. She doesn't seem to want to align with that. But she definitely doesn't. I would definitely not say that she doesn't present like a very active Mormon right now.
Yeah. Sammy?
Deconstruction happens in phases, and she's clearly done some major deconstruction. That's not someone sitting there saying Mormonism is the one true church. So I think she's probably deconstructed more than she's willing to like say publicly, because that's generally how this stuff goes. Like, it's a lot just to process it within yourself, let alone to then have like an entire PR engine follow. It's an intense thing to broadcast.
Well, and especially too, as like a Mormon, you look at what she says as, I don't follow blindly. I don't believe something just because somebody tells me. And we can hear that and infer a great deal.
For sure.
That's like the main thing.
Connotation. Yeah,
Obedience
exactly.
is the first law of heaven, babes.
Yeah.
It's
It's very telling. And I think
That's
that's
the
why I
telling.
lean on the side of,
Wow.
because it says a lot.
By the way, I just said Chad Frankie. It was Kevin Frankie. I'm sorry.
Oh, he's the one that's still devout.
Yeah.
Okay,
not Chad.
is Chad
okay,
not?
I knew that.
Oh, I don't know about Chad.
Mm.
Yeah. But sorry, that was Kevin Frankie, Ruby Frankie's husband, who still
That makes more sense.
speaks
Makes more
devout
sense,
speak.
yeah.
I apologize. Thanks to the comments.
Chad's Frankie's doing a lot on TikTok right now.
Chad is also
And
Yeah.
Snapchat.
Yeah.
He's
Going well.
got a lot going on.
Yeah. My understanding is that she's not a believer anymore. But at the same time, or a practicing Mormon in any Orthodox sense of the word. But, for the never Mormons that just don't understand these subtleties, there's a super high cost to coming out as an apostate. You risk excommunication from the church. You risk alienating your mom in this case, potentially being disowned, disinherited. You get cut off from friends. You get cut off from community. And in her case, she's wanting to get endorsement deals. She's always doing swimsuit, endorsements or health product endorsements. And if you come out as a ex-Mormon apostate heathen, especially in Utah, it's going to limit your income. Honestly, your speaking opportunities. She's a professional speaker. There are all sorts of financial incentives for her to soft pedal her apostasy.
Yeah, I saw her speak at BYU. I'm sure
Yeah.
it's a big part of what she does.
And I'm not saying she's not courageous. Obviously, she's a hero and more courageous than me.
Yeah, and it could potentially be more that she has big Mormon donors to her foundation rather than like,
another
like
reason.
she could get sponsorships from brands that aren't, she doesn't need Mormon brands to sponsor her at this point. But
there are Mormon billionaires that would contribute to her foundation
yeah,
if she wasn't viewed as an apostate.
but
And
I'm
she
sure
does seem to still believe in God. She spoke to, like, her verbiage, it lends itself to the assumption that that's still there. And I, again, just from a personal curiosity, would love to dig into that with her a little bit more.
Yeah.
One of the phases of deconstruction,
Yeah. And I meet a gazillion people that don't believe it all anymore, but either hide in the church as a devout member and just deceive everybody because the costs are so high, or they don't believe, but they would never say it publicly. I mean, that's 95% of the ex-Mormons I meet.
And it would probably be really difficult too, not only financially, but like she has been held up as a hero, which she is. And I feel like the
influence.
fall from grace, just like socially from leaving the church would have a totally unique and different layer, to be seen as like,
That's a great
to
point.
be seen as a hero. And then
I'm sure
to
she and
have,
David
like-
Archuleta probably have a lot lot to relate
Yeah.
to one another on that aspect
Yeah.
of things.
And Lindsay Sterling.
Right.
Yeah. And I think if anyone she wants to positively influence, it's believing Mormon young women.
Exactly.
And they're going to be more inclined to
Who are
listen
going
to
to be
her.
the most vulnerable to a similar.
Yeah.
You
She
know,
doesn't want to
similar
discredit
thought.
herself to them by being branded as an apostate.
There was a quote in the Netflix podcast where that said, her experience fundamentally changed her relationship with her faith. The trauma she endured forced her to reevaluate what she'd been taught and to seek answers for herself.
Yeah. All right. Well, we did it. We did it in under 3 hours, which is a world record. Final thoughts. Here's one thing I'll ask really quickly. I participated in several Ruby Franke, Jody Hildebrandt documentaries, and Heather Gay, documentaries, and also not Tim Ballard, but Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell. Journalists tend to want to skirt the Mormon doctrinal, theological, and historical contextual factors that we spent the majority of our time on. I think that's partly why we exist, is because no one else is going to talk about the stuff that we do, unfortunately. But this is just my take. One thing I'll say, other than just being inspired by Elizabeth's courage and wit and spunk and tenacity and her cause and her mission and how graceful and brilliant and articulate and inspiring she is. I'm always underwhelmed by how little these documentaries talk about Joseph Smith, polygamy, Mormon history, Mormon doctrine, Mormon theology, Mormon culture. What a huge missed opportunity. And I get that they only had 2 hours, and so they wanted to keep the story focused. But
On mushroom tea.
What's that?
On mushroom tea.
That's good.
You know that Ruby Franke, I think you were interviewed for it too. It was like an ABC thing that we were both interviewed for. I talked so much in the hours that they interviewed us about that, like the contextual of it, but it just gets cut.
Yeah. But were y'all frustrated by that at all? Or somebody mentioned that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was barely mentioned in the entire documentary.
And I'm sure that was on purpose. But I think coming from this Mormon, ex-Mormon, post-Mormon, whatever space, there's just, like we were talking about with her statements, there's so much to infer that never Mormons wouldn't be able to get that whole picture. And not to say we understand her experience in any way, but just to see how much was informed. I actually didn't include this clip, but in the Dax Shepard podcast, he says, how much do you think religion was intertwined in all of this for you? And she said, way too much. And, I think we as Mormons can feel that as we're watching, and we can pick up on just the minutia of this experience and see how it is so much of the Mormon experience and how heartbreaking it is that that's the case, that it can facilitate and be a part of such horrible things.
And it's got to be tough for journalists because they're not going to be experts in all these religions. And it is technically like this guy is not a representative of the Mormon church. The Mormon church disavows all of this. So it's a tough spot for them to be in. And you don't want to like rub salt into the wound of the family and be like, and your religion did this.
But I'm just so tired of being interviewed for hours and hours and hours and hours, and it all gets cut.
And
it
you're
never
like,
makes
this
the
is the crux of it all, but they won't say
why it matters.
It's like, purity culture is so oof.
Honestly, some would say, well, you should be glad, John, because that gives a reason for Mormon stories. I would rather Mormon stories not exist and this stuff get covered well in the news than have to do Mormon stories. Anyway, that's my gripe. Final thoughts from you three wonderful panelists. Let's see. Alyssa, you go first.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, one thing that she talks about a little bit in that podcast is like they asked her, the Netflix person, asked her why she wanted to do this documentary, why now, and she just talks a little bit about the importance of story and how she feels like story is really what people remember, and that's what can really help people. And I think and a big part of her focus was like, I don't want people just to watch this out of curiosity or just out of like the shock factor, wow, but she really wanted it to be helpful. And I think that the Mormon element of this is part of what makes that really helpful, is seeing how there's like an old saying, I can't remember who said it, so I'll probably butcher it, but the idea is like, if you zoom in close enough to a specific story, the whole universe opens up. And I think that really happens here, where we see her story really closely. And while people aren't going to be able to relate to a lot of the specifics of it, they will relate to elements of it and relate to the emotions of it. And we see that child sexual abuse is so prevalent within the Mormon church that a lot of Elizabeth's story is different elements of Mormonism repackaged in new ways. And I just think that's really important for us to be able to address, and not only look at it from as like a shock factor, go, wow, that's crazy, but to be able to look critically at our own community, not only Mormonism, but our other communities at large, and see ways that we might be inflicting pain or bypassing it, and just continue to do all that we can to advocate, especially for children who are survivors or who are vulnerable to exploitation.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Alyssa. Sammy, you go next.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is like a real modern man's search for meaning to me. And that's just a book I've been thinking about a lot lately.
Viktor Frankl.
Yeah. And just that concept of like finding the will to survive in the worst conditions possible.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first read Man's Search for Meaning, probably 10 years ago, I didn't necessarily find it to be this like inspiring, hopeful read the way that a lot of people did. But getting really into Elizabeth's story again the last few days, I actually have found that more inspiring. It's for some reason it's resonated with me more, because I'm like, I mean, what is worse than a child having to endure that? And yet she did, and it seems like she's really, been so strong and impactful as a result. And it would be perfectly fine if she never was impactful, she doesn't owe that. But I just think she's so amazing. Yeah. I really am inspired. And I don't know if it's like, it weirdly does give me like this resolve within myself to be like, okay, well, if Elizabeth Smart can endure that, then we all have a lot more capacity than we think, because that is like the worst of the worst.
Yeah. And just how gracefully and courageously she comports herself now.
Yeah.
She would have all of our understanding if her life appeared to be going off the rails.
Yep.
And yet she's just like shining, and no shade on people whose lives don't look that way after all the trauma they experience, but very inspiring. Anyway, thank you, Sammy. Taylor.
Yes.
So you survived your first Mormon Stories panel.
I did, and I won't come back until 500,000. So
subscribe.
So get on it, guys.
I want to echo what all three of you have said, where every time I've encountered content of hers, I just am so compelled and so struck by her bravery, by her grace. And it is just extraordinarily impressive that she was able to take truly a worst nightmare and continue to fight, when I'm sure there are times where it can be at her own expense in terms of mental well-being. And obviously I can't speak for her, and it's interesting to try and get so granular with picking apart these words, but I feel like it's a very important commentary from a Mormon perspective for us to elaborate on those things. But while we can't speak on how she is feeling and how she does with everything, I think it is just remarkable, her spirit and her resolve and her composure and her bravery, that she just is such an inspiration. And I don't know if it's the right thing to say like, I feel lucky to be, somewhat adjacent to this story as it happened, near where I live. But because it was so close to home, I was able to follow it growing up and follow it now with the documentary and her book and all the things over the years. And it just feels like it's had an impact on me throughout my life. And it's an honor to be able to, have some sort of association with her, whether it's through Mormonism or through Utah. I just can't sing her praises well enough. And I do feel like it's really beautiful to see the impact that she's making, and making a difference for children regarding sexual violence. I just think it's one of the most needed things in the world right now. And I really admire what she does.
Amen. And shout out to Ed and Lois and Mary Catherine and all of the Smart family. Yeah. And the uncles or not?
Yeah, shout out to the uncles. Shout out to everyone.
Excellent. Well, shout out to you, Alyssa, and Samantha, and oh my gosh.
Do I get you? See,
Taylor,
I can't come back
Taylor,
if you don't
Taylor,
remember.
it's not automatic, but that's why you need to come back. I got it. I got there. Taylor, thanks to all of you. What a lovely panel. Thanks for preparing the slides, the flow, Alyssa, and the videos. And Sammy, you didn't, provide any of that.
Yeah, that's not really where I shine.
Thanks for shining today.
Yep.
Check out Zelf on the Shelf. Subscribe to Mormon Stories and Zelf on the Shelf. Check out Alyssa's stuff at
AlyssaWhitbeck.com.
And you're also on Instagram and TikTok.
I am at Alyssa Whitbeck on Instagram and List Likes Words on TikTok.
LYS
LYS
words.
Likes words.
And you write stuff.
I do write stuff. So I have a review of a book that talks about the relationship between purity culture and disordered eating coming out pretty soon.
Let's go.
Let's do a whole episode on that. My
Wait,
goodness.
can I talk to you about that on Zelf on the Shelf? That sounds so good.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Are you poaching?
Yeah, coaching.
Yeah.
Coach?
I'm here to work, John. I'm networking.
That's great. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll look forward to that. Taylor, do you have anything you want to promote?
Just myself though. Nothing. No, just glad to be here, hanging out with some cool people. And look forward to next time.
And you in the comments, I mean, we know you love Alyssa and Samantha, but let us know if you want us to bring Taylor back. I give Taylor an A+.
Oh, that's
So,
very kind. Thank you.
But if you viewers and want to say really kind things to any of our panelists, I'm sure
really
they would
need
love it.
Yeah, we could really use a
Anything could help
boost.
right now, guys. I cannot stress this enough.
And if you have mean things to say, just
Keep it to yourself.
Don't worry about it.
Send it in the group chat.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today on Mormon Stories. Thanks to our donors that make all this possible. If you value this type of content and you want to see it continue, donations are down. Ad revenue is down. Things are hard on YouTube land. So we live primarily by donors. So if you value this content and don't want to see it go away, the way you can help keep it going is to go to mormonstories.org/donate, become a monthly donor, and we won't end prematurely what we do here. I'm also being threatened with a lawsuit by the Mormon Church. This Friday, I'm doing mediation with their attorneys, and soon I may have some news about being sued. They want me to take the word Mormon out of our domain name, out of the podcast name, and out of any of our social media handles. And they're threatening to sue me if I don't. So we're mediating on Friday, and stay tuned for what happens there. But we may have to fight a $500 billion organization to preserve our podcast.
Oh,
So-
But this podcast is worth it
So
to fight the
you're saying
500.
fight?
It is.
Yeah.
Right.
Or just rebrand. Victory for Satan Stories podcast.
what would you call this podcast if you can't call it? You can't use the word Mormon, and you can't use Latter-day Saint. What in
Mormon?
the what?
Mormon?
Somebody said ex-Mormon stories.
It's
I
one word.
can't-
Make it one word.
Surely they can't take Mormon. I just don't believe they could own that.
We'll see.
Well, when they denounced it too, it
Yeah. You can't have it both ways.
seems like they're just a little butthurt.
I would hate to call it ex-Mormon stories. Wouldn't that
Mormon with
suck?
3 Ends.
Yeah, because it isn't just ex-Mormon
Yeah.
stories.
No,
It's
not at all.
stories, Mormon stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. Well, anyway, if you also want to donate to our legal fund, we may have a link for you to donate.
It could be
to.
like M with like the O as a
Zero.
zero
Mhm.
Mormon. Like
Mormon with the zero.
Yeah.
The zeros. Yeah. All right. Anyway, thanks for joining us. Subscribe, donate if you can. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories. Elizabeth Smart, we think you're amazing, along with your family. Take care, everybody. See you all again very soon.
The podcast formerly known